Now, good evening and welcome to 15th day of the Omer count, third week, just finished second week, third week, first day of the Omer count. And most of you probably have been here. If not, what we're doing, both with this Saturday night room and with the Facebook group that's associated with it, is we're taking a look at each week as a whole week through a different lens every week, something very different and very unique. The first week, we kind of did an overarching thing, and we tapped into some of the biblical figures, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Aaron, Joseph, and David, as they associate with each of the 7 attributes that we look at. And the second week we just concluded was, again, a mixture of stuff. I'm trying not to make it too much one thing, but we were looking at some of the Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which is more or less a secular business and self-help book, but its 7 principles happen to align exactly with the 7 aspects that we cover over the 7 weeks of the Omer count. One of life's mysteries there, how those 7 things are exactly the same. And this week, we're taking another detour, something different. This is the third week, so we're looking at the third emanation called Tiferet, and Tiferet means literally beauty, but it's beauty in the sense of harmony, balance. It's also associated with the aspect of truth, as in complete truth. The 2 prior emanations came, one from one side of expansion and one from the one side of restriction. So they're both their own thing. They both, in a sense, have a partial truth to them. But Tiferet is the balance between the 2. So it's associated with the idea of truth and with the patriarch of Jacob. And in the Torah, it says, there's a line in the Torah that says the truth is with Jacob. So the purpose of the group, as I said, is to take a different look at it every week. Most of the resources you find out there are pretty much straightforward and keep it kind of, strictly in the text of the Bible, or some expounding through oral Torah. But we're doing something weird here, doing something different every week. So this week, the third week, because this aspect of Tiferet is the one of balance and harmony in multiple ways, it's the one very closely associated with the concept of Mashiach, the Messiah, at Tiferet. That isn't saying that, Mashiach's Tiferet, Tiferet's Mashiach, and that's all there is to it. No, it's just simply saying that it's very closely associated because of those ideas of balancing the left and the right, mercy and judgment, and balancing above and below heaven and earth. So that concept of bringing everything together, when everything comes back together, is when we go into the Messianic kingdom, the Messianic age, if you will, and beyond. So, sorry, what's that? That do? Oops. Did it change? Oh, okay, cool. Little trick someone just told me. Control L, full screen view. All right, well, I hope that's better. Now you can't hear me, no. All right, so we're looking tonight at Mashiach, but we're looking at a particular aspect of Mashiach in that, it's found in a number of places, but primarily from a Rabbi Nachman of Breslov from a while back, who wrote a lot about this, saying that prayer is the main weapon of Mashiach, of the Messiah. Very interesting idea that is found a lot in the Breslover writings of Rabbi Nachman. So we're going to be looking at kind of this concept, this thing called prayer, from a lot of different perspectives this week and tonight in our discussion. And I'll be covering the first hour or so with looking at half a dozen different texts and a little bit of insight into some hidden things in terms of prayer and connecting us to God. And then later in the evening, hide the kids, we're going to go even deeper down the rabbit holes, and Elishev is going to take us down some of those into some way back before creation all the way through today, aspects of prayer that's going to lay a foundation down for a future group that we hope to have. B'ezrat Hashem, we hope to have a prayer, meditation, and intention group, separate thing entirely, that we hope forward to developing this year. So this is all starting tonight. Can't read my own handwriting. Okay. So what we're going to do is I'm going to first briefly at the beginning of the Omer, there's a prayer briefly said for each night of the Omer. So we just do one on tonight for this night's one, which I'll do. And I'll say it in Hebrew and English, both. And then after that, I'll have just a brief video to watch that explains a little bit in general about tonight's Omer. We've been playing videos by, I forget her name now, for Rebbetzin. I'm forgetting her name, but anyhow, you've seen in the weeks past, she does a nice explanation of what this particular Omer for the week is. This is Tiferet, as I said. And after that, we'll have some fun slides and discussion. And of course, throughout the evening, questions and comments are always desired and welcome. So feel free. All right. So can you turn my volume up a click? I don't even know how I can do that in terms of, I don't know. You can't hear me very well right now, Terry? Because I'm not even sure how I can do that just with this computer here and access it, especially now that I'm recording. So can anyone else hear me okay? All right. You hear me okay over there? A couple people hear me okay. So not sure what I can do here. All right. So hopefully I'll try to talk close enough to the input here on the computer. I'm not using a headset because we were having trouble with that before. So I'm just, I want to check something here. No, okay. All right. So the 15th day of the Omer tonight, which is the second week and first day. So in the Torah, it says to count the days and also count the weeks. So when you get to every new, like the first, the 8th, the 15th, you have both a new day and a new week. So what we do, it's not that long. So it starts, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav, Itzivanu al Seferat HaOmer, which is blessed are you, God, source of harmony. You make us holy through your mitzvot, commandments, commanding us to count the Omer. And that part's repeated every day. And then the specific one follows. It's Hayom Hamisha Asar Yom Shehem Shnei Shavuot Veyom Echad LeOmer. Today is the 15th day of the Omer, which makes 2 weeks and 1 day for the Omer. And what we're doing there is not just a boring recitation, but it's kind of tapping us into the fact that this is a specific day with specific energy to it, if you will, specific concepts to it to learn, and ties back specifically through time, through history, with people doing this all the way back to the journey from Egypt into the land of Israel. And we'll talk about more of that later too. So I'm going to play about an 8 or 9 minute video here. So get yourself comfy in your chairs. And this is just a bit of explanation. This is this lady you're going to see is with Chabad. And they have pretty good information on all this stuff. So I'm going to play that for you here. So give me 1 second while I go retrieve that video, which I should have queued up. Should have queued up is the key word here. Okay. Hold on one second. Find my way back to you guys. And there it is. Okay.
We are in the time period between the holidays of Passover and Shavuos. We are counting the Omer. This is a 7-week process of self-refinement. Each week, we work on one of our 7 emotional traits as we count the 49 days of the Omer. This is the 3rd week, the week of Tiferet, the emotional trait of beauty and harmony. In the 1st week, we worked on rectifying the trait of Chesed, which is our ability to love and to give, reflecting God's goodness and giving. It's a benevolent, generous perspective, wanting to say yes and to give more and more. In the 2nd week, we worked on refining the trait of Gevurah, which is strength, awe, and the ability to have correct boundaries. In that trait, the person sees the need to respect others and to have appropriate dignity, meaning leaving the right space and perhaps backing off and sometimes saying no, with clarity, with justice, the ability to say no. After having worked on refining Chesed and Gevurah, in this 3rd week, we work on Tiferet, which is the quality of living in a beautiful way, emulating God's compassion. Tiferet is the synthesis of Chesed and Gevurah, of knowing when to give and how, of when to hold back and in which way, when to say yes and when to say no, all in a compassionate, balanced way. Refined Tiferet brings us to a new level of inner harmony. These are the 3 core emotional feeling traits. How do we experience the trait of Tiferet? Let me give you an example. Let's say that a person is an employer and he's being asked by his employee for a rather large salary increase. In Chesed, the employer sees the good qualities of his employee. He looks with a generous perspective, and he sees that the person is really doing the best that he can, doing quite a good job. He's doing better and better, and he applauds the employee's good efforts, and he wants to give the raise. He wants to say yes, because that's the quality of Chesed. In Gevurah, the employer sees with an accurately critical perspective. From this perspective, he sees that the employee is relatively new, has still not developed his skills yet, is doing a good job, but still on a certain level, and certainly sees where he is lacking and where he really needs to improve. And so he doesn't feel that this person yet deserves any raise, and so he wants to say no. In Tiferet, however, it's different. In Tiferet, the employer sees with a broader perspective. He sees both sides. He feels compassion for the employee, and he really wants to encourage him. He sees that this is a person who, with the right training, will really do a lot better and will grow into a good employee. And so he wants to deal with this with Tiferet in a beautiful, balanced, and harmonious raise. So this employer gives a small raise and promises future raises when certain goals and levels have been accomplished. Now, this decision from Tiferet is not a simple yes. It's not saying, yes, you can have the raise. Nor is it a no. Sorry, you can't. This is different. This is a beautiful combination beyond yes or no. Tiferet is not a compromise. Tiferet is a new level altogether. Tiferet is a higher perspective. It's a harmonious overview that allows for a multifaceted and compassionate solution. Here, the employer is able to have the benefit of knowing what is the yes, being aware of what is the reason for no, and coming to a higher and broader perspective, which gives a much more harmonious, multifaceted result. During the week of the Omer, we work on every aspect of each trait. Every day we progress, working on moving forward with more consciousness. Every day counts. How do we work with this? In Chesed of Tiferet, for example, we relate to another person's behavior by looking at him with compassion, instead of just looking at him with a sense of our own feelings and how we feel about what he is doing, or whether we like it or not. Instead of that, we look at him with compassion. We realize, we see his limitations, but we realize that looking from the perspective of compassion will give us the overview that will help us to see him, not just our feelings, in a better and more harmonious way. In Gevura of Tiferet, we are able to be unselfish, to hold ourselves back, in order to care about another person, and therefore to build a harmonious relationship with that person. In Gevura of Tiferet, we realize that whenever we want to make a relationship with another person, we need to give them space, care about them, see what they need and what they want and what's important to them, who they are. And in order to do that, we need to hold ourselves back. That's the Gevura for the sake of Tiferet. We work with Chesed of each trait, then we work with Gevura of each trait, and then with Tiferet of each trait as we go on to complete the work of each week of looking at each of the 7 aspects of each trait, one after the other, for 7 weeks. Let's look for a moment at the archetypal figure that represents Tiferet, and that is Jacob, Yaakov, the third of our biblical forefathers. He completed the work of the 3 patriarchs. Jacob remained committed, continuing to faithfully serve God through the many complex events of his life. He relied on God's compassion while he worked with difficult people in difficult situations, one after another. Jacob worked hard and found ways to bring out the good wherever he was. In all circumstances, and there were difficult ones in his life, in all circumstances he went forward and he built the foundation of the Jewish people. Each and every one of Jacob's sons became the founders of all of the 12 tribes. This week, let's work to bring Tiferet into our lives by looking for the beauty in each person, finding the good in each situation, feeling compassion and empathy for another person in his circumstances of life, and appreciating Hashem's compassion for us, and emulating that compassion by being compassionate to others. The energy of each of the 49 days of the counting of the Omer makes us shine. Let's make every day count.
Okay, I just have to go back and pause that here so I don't start playing a whole background. There we go. Let's see here. Back to you guys. All right. So that was a general overview of Tiferet for the week. Each one of the midot, the seven emanations, seven characteristics, has multiple facets to it. So it's not just one thing. So we say like Tiferet is beauty in terms of balance, but it's also compassion. It's also truth. It's a lot of things. Because of those things, it relates to prayer. As the Rebbetzin was saying, it helps you be kinder to people, and prayer has a lot to do with dealing with negative emotion. We'll talk about that later. That there's several things that are mentioned in the Deuteronomy specifically that deal with depression, negative emotions, and temptation. We'll talk about that in a bit. So we're going to be looking at a few different aspects. As she said, it's not compromise, and it's never about compromise in the middle. That's not what real balance is. Just like if you're familiar with the setup of these emanations on the diagram, the tree of life, below Tiferet is Yesod. Yesod is associated with several things too, and Yesod is associated with Shalom, peace. And peace is not compromise. What's that old saying? The absence of war is not peace. No, peace is when everything is integrated and respectful and functioning well, and that's real Shalom. So the whole idea of the middle is a proper integration and not some type of inappropriate temporary compromise. So that's just an important aspect to keep in mind. So I'm going to do is put up the, I like her videos. They're all relatively short. There was one longer one last week, but I think they're all in that 10-minute range, give or take. And she gives a nice overview of the characteristic for the week. And as she said, most of you are familiar, but if not, each week has its own characteristic. And then each day within the week, we look at one of the seven within each one. So you go through 7 times 7, 49 days. It brings you to Shavuot on the 50th. 7 weeks brings you to the 8th week, and the concept of 8 or the 8th is beyond our world of creation, beyond this existence that we function into a higher spiritual level. That's what the 8th represents here. So I'm going to queue up a wonderful slideshow. I only have one other video tonight, which is short, which will come up fairly early, but some fun slides. Let's see here. Yep, okay, so I'll go back to my share button. PowerPoint. Ta-da. All right, there we go. Back here. Okay, so boom. Most of the slides have very little text on them. This was the only one because I wanted to copy this directly out. I hope there's not too many typos. Out of the prayer book, the Siddur, I have one from Art Scroll. And when I got it, I opened it to the back, which is the front. And there was a nice little introductory section, just a few paragraphs on what is prayer, which is probably a good thing to put at the beginning of a prayer book. But it's something that, probably doesn't get enough consideration. And while I'm yakking, you guys can just go ahead and read through this. But the basic idea here is prayer is not just about asking God for, when you need something. I mean, that's like part of it. And of course, you probably can assume God already knows, and God already knows best, but we are still to ask and all. But really, it's not about us being like little kids, just, whenever I need something, I go to daddy and ask. That's really not what prayer is about. Prayer, as you see, if you read this, is really about elevating ourselves to make a better connection, to kind of see things from God's perspective. Because if you can see things more from God's perspective, you'll understand it better and can make better choices regarding whatever the matter is. So this is very similar to what we talked about in the fall when we did our rooms around the Sukkot in the fall, in that you have 7 days of Sukkot and followed by an 8th. And the whole idea of going into the sukkah and with the lulav and etrog and what's said in prayers and shaking those things and the structure of the sukkah and all that stuff is about elevating ourselves to a higher level. It's said, like the idea here, and I don't literally do this, but metaphorically, is to elevate yourself above the sukkah, and you look back down through the thatched roof. That's why it's not solid. Sometimes people will say, "Oh, you look above to the heavens," which is fine. But the idea here is to elevate yourself, so to speak, spiritually, so that you're looking back down through the roof of the sukkah into this world with the bird's eye view, or more accurately, the God's eye view of things. So that's part of the reason we do the thatched roof above the top of the sukkah every year. So same concept here with prayer in terms of judging things correctly. You can see some of the language in this paragraph here that it has to do with judging and making good decisions, which of course, the closer you are to God, the more spiritually elevated you become, which is part of what we're trying to do here with the whole Omer count for 49 days, is to improve ourselves and get closer to God, to make a better connection. The more accurate our view will be. So on that note of connection, I'm going to go, hopefully, here we go. What's in a word? Okay, so the whole point of the Bible, the scriptures in Judaism, a good, I guess I could say, but a major point is about us getting closer and closer to God, to removing negative things from ourselves and adding positive things that bring us closer to our Creator. That's a major point and purpose of everything that's directly in the words of the Torah, as well as the deeper meanings and all of that. Okay. And what's interesting is how many words in the text from the Hebrew actually mean, either directly or indirectly, mean to connect or have something to do with connection. So you have the incense that is burned in the either the tabernacle or the temple, ketoret, which is incense, which is from an Aramaic word meaning connection. Then around the same part in the Torah, you see the offerings. Sometimes it's carbon, singular, carbonot, plural, which is also from a term meaning to come near. So these things are some things that Hashem put in place that are more physical and external to us in nature to bring us closer, bring the community closer too. And then you have the three I have in the red below, which are prayer, which is our focus for tonight. Tefillah, if you look on different websites, you can find, just put tefillah in on kosher websites with connect or connection, and you'll see things. I put askmoses.com I got that way back. It's the first place I stumbled on that, so I left that in there. But it also means connection. So that's what prayer is about. Now, this is, of course, more of a personal thing, although there's communal prayer. And then when you look up the idea of da'at, the da'at means to know or knowledge. But it carries with it the sense, and we've talked about this before in many of our groups, it carries with it the sense of making a connection at every level. So physically in the Torah, in Genesis, where it says Adam knew his wife and they had a child, and the word there is da'at for the physical intimacy, as well as all the way through things like in Daniel chapter 12, where it says knowledge will increase. The implication there is really spiritual knowledge, and it's followed in that verse 12:4. It is in Daniel. It's followed in that verse that people will travel to and fro, which is also interpreted as spiritually connecting up and down, sort of like the angels on Jacob's ladder, if you want a visual. So, because of spiritual knowledge increasing, or actually from going to and fro, back and forth, connecting to God and getting more information, bringing it down. So back and forth, all of that relates to spiritual da'at. And then mitzvot, just the, we'll get to Aaron. I'll hold a question on Aaron's sons later, because we were talking about that yesterday. That's a big OMG on that one. So we'll get to that later. The mitzvot, which is just the word for good deeds or random acts of kindness or the positive commandments, also comes from connection. So all these words in the Torah and Tanakh throughout have to do with the sense of us making connection. Now, connection can mean, and it's something I think Elisheva may be touching on later, connection can mean internal to you, connecting yourself properly inside, getting your ducks in a row, as they say. Unless you're a Hindu, then you get your chakras in a row. And then, once you get yourself well connected with God internally, then you can help other people or help connect to other people and make the world a better place. But it's all about that. So we're going to move into looking at half a dozen texts, short texts that are all prayer related. Some are directly considered as prayers. Others are texts that can be considered as prayer. So moving down, we're going to start the way the day is supposed to start, which is a prayer said upon waking up. This, if you're not familiar with this is a cool thing to learn about. And the prayer is called Mode'ani. Okay, and move the window out of the way here. So the Mode'ani is said, and this gets deep right off, okay? The Mode'ani is said first thing upon awakening in like a traditional Jewish home before doing any like other prayers or the Shema or hand washing or anything. The Mode'ani comes first to start your day. And there's a reason for this, and it gets into some of the, the deeper aspects. And if you notice something interesting about the prayer right off, if you look on the right side where it's transliterated and translated in the Hebrew, from the Hebrew, you'll notice that there is none of the typical names of God are mentioned in the text, other than eternal living king, so Melech. But that's not really one of the names of God. So you'll see it's interesting here. There's no particular name of God. And if that rings a bell, if you were around when we had Purim, the book of Esther is also interesting in that it too has no name of God anywhere in the text of the book of Esther. And it does, however, have numerous references to Melech and variations of the word Melech, the king, in there. So we didn't get to why it's before hand washing quite yet, but we're getting there. So the idea here, the thought here is that when you pray with a name of God, or you do blessing with the name of God, that's connected to certain things. It's connected to different levels of existence, different sephirot, different names of, different aspects of the names of God, different parts of your soul, all this kind of stuff. Every time you pray using some name of God, it's got some type of connection within existence. So this can be even a little bit outside of what we would think of creation, in terms of, well, what was it before creation? Yeah, okay, it was something we call God or Elohim, but there's some connection to something. With the Mode'ani, it's said that this prayer connects to a level of reality, I guess you'd call it, or a world, a fifth world, if you will, beyond even our idea of existence. So we can grasp something before creation barely, but there's something even before that is what it's saying. And what you're doing with the Mode'ani is that you are going straight to that unknowable source. You can call it Ein Sof or something else, but you're recognizing that even before anything at all that we can conceive of, even any of these names of God and how we pray with them, anything like that at all, that we're going back to a level here with the Mode'ani that takes you back to this highest level of the soul called Yechida, and the Yechida is the level of the soul that is said to be that aspect, if you want to think of it geometrically, but although there's no real geometry involved here because there's no real space, but in terms of you have these levels of the soul, the other end, if you will, that's really like connected to or part of, if you will, God. That's the Yechida, which is this, perfect unity with no parts, no divisions, no concept, nothing. So this is what the Mode'ani is about. And also the book of Purim and the story and why God is not mentioned in there, and the teaching that in the world to come, that the Purim will be the only day that's still kept of all the other holidays, the other feast days, the other Moedim. They won't be necessary anymore. But Purim will be kept because it's tied to this eternal aspect of God before anything came into existence, and that's why there's no name of God at all in the story. So, I'm going to move a couple of windows out of the way here so I can see my screen. I should probably just shut this one here. No, I can't shut that one. That one's the one that tells me my microphone's still working. Okay, so there's different, that being the case, there's different aspects that you can look at this prayer in terms of how we could relate it to our reality, our soul, and these different levels of understanding, these different levels of interpretation. I got this from a book called On the Essence of Hasidus. It's a discourse by Rabbi Schneerson, the late Rabbi Schneerson of Chabad. It's got some very cool stuff in it, and I found this section on this prayer, so it's very interesting. So if you look at the prayer from a simple level, just giving thanks, and it's said before anything else, just like we say a blessing before a meal, before we eat. So we're saying thank you to God before anything. That's the simple meaning, the Peshat. At the lower level, the lower world of Asiya, which is our physical world. Then we're going in reverse here from top to bottom, which is really bottom to top. The next level of interpretation, the remez, is when you're hinting at something. So this hint here of restoring my soul. Close the window that popped up. The idea here is, at one point there'll be a different type of restoration, resurrection. And then a drash is when midrash, when you expound on something and make other connections. So here, we're made new every day, and you get to start over. There's no debts carried over, and it's a nice fresh start that you get every day. You're connecting back to the source of sources. And then you get to the more mystical level, which is called the Sod. And the Sod here has an idea here where it says living and eternal king. We're going to get to that more in a bit. But the idea here of the living God, which is a name of God, El Chai, C-H-A-I, which is life or living. El Chai is associated with the aspect of Yesod, which is the one just above the last one, which is Malkut or kingdom. So living is Yesod, king, eternal king is Malkut. So there's the idea of uniting Yesod and Malkut, which, as we're going to show in a minute, is uniting the groom and the bride. So this concept of unity between the groom and bride is a major topic throughout the Bible, the whole Bible. And then finally, there's that deeper mystical hidden level before anything else, as we were talking about a few minutes ago, which is the hidden of the hidden. Sod shall, so say that 3 times. It's like she sells seashells. Huh? Sod shall sod, which is this level of what's called Adam Kadmon, this primordial image of man, which is completely unified and represents that level even before Genesis 1:1. Before that, the Torah starts with a beit, not an aleph. Well, this is going back to the hidden aleph before anything else. And this level it's like a level, and it's not. It permeates everything else below it. So think of it kind of like a stream of water coming down and watering the 4 levels below it. It's something that gives that eternal essence to everything else that we know and we study, etc. So this is the prayer that starts the morning. So right away, you're reciting this nice little prayer, but it's immediately some pretty heavy stuff here. And the word actually comes from Hod, and we were talking about Hod during last week, I think it was, which is one of the midot, one of the emanations we're going to talk about. and it's derived from that the word modeh, thanks. Okay, so let's look at one more slide. No, actually, you know what? I'm going to go back. I hate to do this to you. I'm going to show you a video, short 3-minute video, okay? As this whole idea of something existing before existence, if you will, a pre-existence, that you look at the Bible and you say, okay, the Bible starts in the beginning. God created heavens and earth. Okay, so I get the idea that there was a God before, and then he created stuff, us and the worlds and all that. But there's actually something before this idea of God that we can't even comprehend. Because we can comprehend the idea that there's a God somehow, but there's something even beyond that, that this is not the deepest or highest level, if you will, of the Almighty or God, whatever word you want to use, that there is, that there's something even outside our range of understanding, because our range of understanding is limited to what we know exists. If there's something that's beyond existence, we can't even conceive of it, and that's how deep it goes with the idea that there's a God, that there's a real God. So one of my favorite people, and you'll know who this guy is, I'm going to put on a video here, just 3 minutes, and this gentleman is going to talk about this idea a little bit. Pay attention. This is going to be one of the strangest things you've ever heard. Hold on to your chairs, okay? So, I know some of you are going to love this. All right, boys and girls. Let's see if I can.
Bereshit bara Elohim. This is so common. Okay, even people who know hardly anything know this. Perhaps many of you know it in Hebrew. Even those of you who don't know Hebrew may be familiar with these words. Bereshit bara Elohim. Okay, as we learned before, it's interesting that the Torah begins with bet and not with aleph. But I want to focus on something else here. What does this phrase mean? Notice I didn't even put the whole verse. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. We're leaving heaven and earth aside for now. Okay, just focusing on the first 3 words of the Torah. Bereshit bara Elohim. That means, of course, in the beginning, God created. But what does the Hebrew actually say? Bereshit, in the beginning. Bara, created. Elohim, God. That's how the Zohar reads the verse. In the beginning, it created God. That's startling. That is the Zohar's commentary on the first pasuk of the entire Torah. Right there you see why the Zohar was hidden. Right there you understand all those restrictions about studying Kabbalah. How can the Zohar say that the Torah begins by saying that God was created? That sounds crazy. That sounds heretical. In the beginning, God created. No, the Zohar says, in the beginning, something created God. Now, this isn't atheism. This isn't a put down of God. This is saying there's something greater about God than what we call God. So who is the subject of Bereshit bara Elohim? It's not Elohim. Elohim is the object. Now, of course, in Hebrew, the object can come after the verb. Certainly the simple meaning of this verse is, in the beginning, Elohim created. There's no doubt. But the Zohar says, no, let's read it hyper-literally. I would call this hyper-literalism. The Zohar says, you want to read the Torah literally? Look at it really literally. In the beginning, it created Elohim. So who is the subject? The subject is the unnameable, Ayin or Ein Sof. The God, what the great one mystic has called the God beyond God. So Ein Sof is certainly the subject, but Elohim, I think this is the Zohar's way of saying what we think of as God, that's a very puny understanding of God. So the Zohar is constantly challenging human theological systems, human theological beliefs.
Okay, so I grabbed that video because that oh, I grabbed that video. Says it's not detecting my microphone. Am I coming through on yours? Okay, someone here, good. Thank you. So when I was putting the slideshow together on the Modiani, I'm like, oh yeah, this would work, because as Daniel Matt is explaining, I like how he summarized it. That's just our puny view of what God is. When we read the first words of the Torah, we're all concluding something unique and different when we see Elohim or God. Everybody thinks differently, and it's our own, even if it wasn't different, it's still just our view. And there's something that is way beyond, like I said, beyond existence. So within existence, where existence starts, is where we see Elohim in verse 1. That use of that term right there, right prior to creation, is at that level we call the beginning of existence. Then within that comes creation. So you could say creation is a subset of existence, and then there's something of what we would call pre-existence in terms of an unknowable God we generally refer to as Ein Sof, meaning without end, without beginning to, but that's assumed. So it takes a whole different way of understanding things. So for instance, when some people pray a famous prayer, it says, our Father who art in heaven, okay, our Father who art in heaven is like far and deep as we can conceive of something to try to relate to God. But there's something beyond Father. Father is just an aspect, emanation, or a way of referring to God that has certain things connected to it. And the idea of God being in heaven has certain things connected to it, etc. And all the names of God, the other names that are associated with God, all do. But as we said with the Modeh, there's something beyond. And when you say that prayer in the morning, you're actually recognizing, although you might not be able to truly connect in the same sense, you're recognizing that there is this connection you have that comes from the eternal God. So what do you got to worry about, right? You're well connected. And you're starting the day with that reality. So back to my illustrious slideshow. And we're going to go from the Modeh to, we'll take a break in a bit and take a break to hit some questions and stuff and share. So we'll go from Modeh. Now, some of you may recognize this old slide. Up next, boom, there it is. Now, this whole slide does not apply to this evening's discussion, just one or two columns do, so don't let it frighten you. But this is actually where a lot of slides like this from last year and some of the different groups we did. This one here, I just happened to recall, so rather than reinvent the wheel, I thought, oh, this is interesting, because you have where the big blue arrow is pointing, you have the Shema, as the Shema lays out, if you will, across these five worlds that we spoke of. So let's go from the bottom up, from the red up, okay? So from the bottom up, we have our physical world that we live in and everything around us, including the sky and the planets and the universes. And if you look with a microscope down to the lowest levels of, atoms and quarks and what have you, that's all part of physical reality with time and space. That's all down in the red zone. Then you have the angelic world above us with angels, as we're told, go back and forth to God. The word angels is messengers. That's like the ladder in Jacob's dream. Then above that, you have the concept of the spiritual heavens, not the sky and the planets. That's way down at the bottom. That's all still physical, as I said, down the bottom. But you have the idea of the spiritual heavens with the throne room of God and the heavenly temple and what Moses looked at to get the design for the menorah, which we'll talk about later, and that kind of idea. So when we say God in heaven, that concept of heaven is that highest level of what's within creation. So there's three parts or three worlds of creation, the lower three. And so when we're saying God in heaven, it's a further attempt to understand God like within creation, though we're recognizing there's the Father concept is even outside of that. That would relate to Elohim that created the heavens and the earth. But then, as we said a few minutes ago, there's even something beyond that we can't relate to. So there's a lot of layers here, and each one, starts from the unknowable God all the way down to a little bit more knowable, and so on down to our level here. So the Shema runs across these most everything on these charts, 99% comes from, can be traced back to kosher sources. Once in a while, I stick something in of my own, which is like the column to the far right, is I found very interesting. There are some things in the New Testament books that are very interesting and parallel these things. But for now, we're sticking with the Shema there in that column with the blue arrow. And the idea of Shema is to hear with an understanding. And again, this is at that high hidden level. So there's this, this hidden understanding from time eternal that's coming down into existence, saying that, and it's Yod He Vav He in the text. And we'll discuss later why it's often called Adonai, but either one is appropriate. There's reasons that Adonai is used too. So when we say or sing the Shema, where we are recognizing this connection through these worlds that God exists in, and all the way down to the bottom, where the last thing we say is Echad. In the Hebrew text, in the Torah, the real Torah, there's a large dalet at the end of the word, and Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet is the fourth letter, and the 4 represents that you're taking this connectivity through these levels of the Shema out into the world, because the number 4, like the 4 corners of the world, the 4 rivers of Eden, the 4 aspects of the Shekhinah go out to 4 parts of the world, etc. That's always a number that's consistent with going out into the world, and that's what the Dalet is said to represent. And we'll get to the door part in a minute. Actually, we're going to talk about the idea of a mezuzah on your door too, with the 4 sides of the door going out into the world. We'll get to that in a bit, actually. If you look over to the third from the left column, it says Deuteronomy 6:5 at the very top, and that's right after Shema, the Shema in 6:4. So this is the beginning of the prayer, the Ve'ahavta, which we're going to look at here in a minute, which also follows down through these levels. And love, this idea of eternal love, we talked about this actually in the Matrix study a bit that we did. And if you look on the far right in Corinthians, it's the same idea. At the end, all you have left is what's at the beginning, which is this pure eternal love of God that began everything. Everything starts and ends with that. And then with Deuteronomy 6:5, we're instructed love. And then who? Lord your God. Okay, that's the same idea of the Lord your God you can grasp, that is just beyond creation. And then within creation, with all of your mind, and these are not in the same order because the chart's in a different order, because in the Torah it starts with your heart. So your mind or soul, it's translated as mind in a lot of translations, which would be your intellect, which you study with, and then your heart, which is prayer, your emotion, and then your physical strength or your assets, your money, whatever you got, time, with works and kind acts. So we're going to look at I'm going to look at that now. The Ve'ahavta is the verse that starts with the verse right after the Shema. Turn my page here. I had a couple things I jotted down. And as we just discussed, the heart, soul, which is translated as mind or intellect, and your might are your 3 aspects of what you have, how you live day to day. You have a physical self, an emotional self, and an intellectual self, all governed or all underneath your spiritual self. But there's another aspect here. Each one of these slides is going to be looking at something differently. So we just looked at the Shema through the different worlds of existence, and before that the Moda'ani, which precedes all of that. Now we're going to look at it a little differently in terms of these Sephiroth, these emanations, of which we deal with the lower 7. And traditionally, as I said earlier, there's the idea of uniting the groom and the bride. And with regard to these lower 7 emanations that we're talking about over these 7 weeks of the Omer, you have the idea of the groom being the first 6 in combination, represent the 6 aspects to the groom aspect. Under certain other contexts, it's the son, S-O-N. And then the bottom one is feminine, and that is the bride aspect, certain other contexts, the daughter aspect. But primarily they're viewed in terms of groom and bride. The bride is associated with the divine presence of God in this world, which because of everything from the sin of Adam all the way down through human beings' sin down to today is considered to be separated in a sense, only from our perspective, in a way that shouldn't be, and one day will be corrected when the bride and groom are brought back together. But in the meantime, there's a separation that we deal with and we need to work on internally and then with others. So that's another way that these things are expressed, is by the idea of uniting masculine and feminine, or groom and bride. And when I was looking, this I don't know if anyone else has come up with this. This is something I was looking at the Ve'ahavta, and it occurred to me that it's interesting how this can be mapped out. So this is not from another source. This is an original. The idea here is that I was seeing was that these 6 midot that formulate the masculine of the groom, also called by this strange term ze'ir anpin, which is a lower countenance. So it's kind of like the idea of a sort of a representation of God in creation, that they kind of fit across the 6 sephirot that make up the groom. Move something out of the way here. Hold on. As I was looking at them and reading them, that it made sense, because the idea of teaching, of proactively teaching your children, the whole start to this thing, to me resembles chesed. The house is on the left. That is directly bina. Above that is called the house. And speaking of them in the house, so that's directly beneath that. The heart is, of course, Tiferet in the middle. And then you have the up and down aspect of Netzah and Hod. And then the path, the path of the Zadik is Yesod and down, which brings you to that part of it. And then the bottom, which is independent in the red there, Malkut, is, if you notice, there's a change in the way the text reads. It goes from things that you're thinking about and teaching versus actual physical action of binding them to your hand on you and then putting them on your house. So there's that aspect again of something going out into the world. We mentioned a minute ago, I think Terry brought up the door, which the mezuzah and all, and the idea here that this flow of spiritual energy that comes through you into your home, with the mezuzah facing out, actually it's facing out into the world. So you have this idea here of the 6, which are more intellect and talking and all of that and teaching, and then the 7th is different in Malkut. And then there's an interesting text from one of Elisheva's favorite books, Yedid Nefesh, and there's a whole chapter on this. The word avodah, worship, in Hebrew actually means work, service. And it says in this chapter, it's a direct quote, the purpose of serving God, worshiping God, is to bring about the coupling of Zeir Anpin and Nukva. Nukva means female, the divine groom and bride. So the purpose of what we're doing here, why we are here, is to unite the bride and the groom within us internally by correcting these aspects of our soul, bringing repair, tikkun. And once you fix yourself a bit, you're able better to help others and help your own relationship with others. And this ties to the idea we've discussed this past couple of weeks, in that the first 3 sephirot that we discuss are more internal change to you as a person. Same when we talked about the 7 habits of Stephen Covey, the first 3 are the same. He expresses it the same exact way. They're more of an internal change to become an independent, strong, independent person, well-grounded. And then the next set of 3 deal with relationships. So we're finishing up the first set of 3 with Tiferet. So this is, in a sense, very much with making ourselves strong internally. So uniting the groom and bride within you is another way of looking at this. There's a lot of ways of looking at the Torah, of course. So this is another aspect that I found personally exist in the Ve'ahavta. I got one other slide later that's another one that I found from a different source. So let's look at one more and then pause. I forget what the next one is here. Okay, no, we're going to pause right here for a second. Any comments, questions, or anything? Let me go back and see what I missed here. I need to go back up. Hold on. Okay. The Aaron's incense thing we'll save for later because it demands much more discussion. And interestingly, you must have a listening device in our home, Valerie, because we were talking about that pretty heavy yesterday. Let's see, Daniel, Matt, yeah, the idea of God. It's almost like you could say it's an aspect of creation there, kind of, sort of. It's it's outside of creation, but it's definitely something we can relate to. The idea of this God concept that we can relate to. I like Daniel Matt saying it's our puny idea. I think that puts it in the proper perspective. All right, so cool. Anyone have anything that you want to add in the text or on the mic before we go further? Yeah, so the Ve'ahavta, anything at that highest level, that level beyond existence, is said to be something that permeates all the four levels below it. When you start talking at that hidden fifth level. So when you think of these things mapped out, they're mapped out on the four-letter name of God, which was not on that last chart, I don't think. So you have the Yod, He, Vav, He, which are the four levels of existence we deal with. But that first letter Yod, which is small in itself, has the idea within it that you put your pen down or your quill and you make a little dot, then you make the little hook. So before you make the whole letter, there's a little dot when your pen touches the paper, but that dot becomes hidden. It doesn't exist once you finish making the letter, but it's there. And that's that idea of that hidden, it's called the cusp, C-U-S-P, cusp of the Yod is hidden there, which is that even deeper level outside of existence, which we have a chart on 13 petals, which has like 100-something rows in it with all these things, how they relate to these 4 or 5 levels. And you'll see that some rows have something in that fifth level, which like the 4 cups at the Seder, and then you have what? You have that mysterious 5th cup for Elijah, which is that hidden 5th level. There's all kinds of things like that. There's always something that's like hidden and mysterious that permeates everything else. So,
Tovia?
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay, I got a question because I think you're going to flip me out again. So we know that the Shema, and I wrote this down here, the Shema itself unites the 6 Soferet with Tiferet in Yesod. The second part, the Baruch, which we say at a whisper, unites Shekinah and her 6 angels. Okay, that's at one level. And what you just said, the Ve'ahavta, and I love your source. I think it's great here because that's at love. That's even at a higher level, you think? So that when we say the Shema and the Ve'ahavta, we're not only uniting it all, we're raising it the whole way up.
Sure.
Wow. Okay, you're flipping me out. Thank you.
What? I'm doing. What was that term?
I said flipping. F-L-I-P-P.
Flipping you out. Oh.
Yes, this is just awesome.
Oh, I haven't heard that since college, but that's a long time ago.
Hey, I'm old, but this is really awesome.
Yeah. What's that? You want to take the mic? Hold on. We got the commentary coming in here. I think. I can unmute you.
Bring it.
All right.
Well, the interesting, you have to mute yourself. Just hit no speaker. I can still hear myself talking. Okay. So one of the interesting things is when Jacob, Israel, has all of his sons gathered around him is when he's only then able to utter the Shema. And So you'll stick around to the end of my presentation because this is pretty cool. Um, the idea is that you have these 12 directions. So it's the unification of the physical, spiritual, the upper and the lower worlds, including encompassing everything physical. It has to do with the number 12 and these diagonals that exist. That's why you have the 12 months in the year. You have the 12 zodiac signs. You have the 12 directions in a cube. And I got a couple pictures from Sefer Yetzirah in my presentation that expound upon this idea further, which is why the ultimate prayer, and this is something that the Ramchal talks about, and he alludes to this idea that this is this ultimate unification of everything. And that's something that Jacob knew, but he wasn't able to utter it until he had his 12 sons with him. So anyway.
Okay, I'm unmuting. You remuting here? Okay, you're muted. Am I back here? Oh yeah, it's saying I'm back. Oh, I have my. Okay, so yeah, if you're not familiar with Valerie and Elisha, we're talking about the first part of the Shema is right out of the Torah text. So Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. And there's an interesting, really bit, by the way, when I think of it, I love weird stuff. So there's an actual, it's a very peculiar tradition I found. Hardly anyone ever heard of this probably, but that the D at the end, the Dalet sound, is accentuated to bring it out into the world. You know, we said that the D is larger in the Torah. So the idea here is actually, and it's a hard letter to accentuate because it's at the end and it's a hard sound. So Echad, it's, and I'm being overly doing it probably, but there's actual groups that do this that try to accentuate the D harder. I just found that kind of funny and interesting. But then the other part, which is said quietly, Baruch Shem Kevod Malchut Le'olam Vayed Amen, is said. It's coming in the future, and it's generally said whispered, silently or quietly by people. At the second half of the Shema. So tradition is a reason. Traditions, people knock traditions sometimes because they don't understand really what they're all about. The New Testament's full of traditions. It doesn't knock tradition. It just knocks a few bad things people were doing, and the Talmud knocks the same things. So there. There's always something deeper and deeper and deeper behind these things. So this is going to keep going fun here. Where were we? Ve'ahavta. Let's do another one here. All right. So as we saw a minute ago, let's go back. There was a little relationship I found with the 7 lower Sephirot in these parts of the Ve'ahavta. So now we're going to look at this ancient prayer. I stumbled on. It's in the book up in the top corner there. Excellent book. If you don't have this, I highly recommend it. Meditation in the Bible by Arya Kaplan. Anything by. You can get it for free online. I mean, you can read it for free online. It's actually online for free. Someone remind me later. I will post the link. It's actually on 13 Petals. We have links to things. And, is it too? Oh, Meditation and Kabbalah, I was just told, is also. That's amazing. So remind me later, and I'll post the link in the group, in our Facebook group. Okay. All right, Jesse, I'll run through this one real quick for us, or should you ask now? You want me to just go ahead and through this? I'll go through this. Go ahead. Okay, fine. So here's an interesting prayer in that this particular prayer from the 16th century, so that's 1500s. Yeah, 1500 and something. So we're talking about, good 500 years ago. Wow. This prayer is very specific. I mean, sometimes you see things that hint at these things, but this one is actually written around the 10 Sephirot with 10 names of God. So this is very interesting, and you'll find the same alignment of names, by the way, in a book called Gates of Light, Sharei Orah, which is a pretty complex text that analyzes these 10 emanations of God called Sephirot, and how they relate to particular names of God, and how you find these things throughout the whole Bible, through the Tanakh, and all the hidden connections. That's what that book makes that book so amazing. So the first one you see actually was when the first time Moses asked God about, who are you and who's sending me? This is the first response he got was Ehyeh asher ehyeh, which is translated either I am that I am or I will be that I will be. That kind of a very deep mystical name that goes, there we go again, above and beyond, outside of, I don't even know what that means. Moses didn't know what it meant. Nobody knows. It's beyond existence, that highest level that we talked about. What's interesting there's a little interesting gematria here in that the name Ehyeh has a numerical value of 21. And it's said twice, Ehyeh asher Ehyeh. And when you take two concepts in Torah and unite them, and it's called a chibur, you multiply them in this case. And when you create something new, you don't create it, but you reveal something new, or that's already there, I should say. In this case, Ehyeh times Ehyeh, or 21 times 21, is 441, which is the numerical value of emet, truth. So this is interesting because this truth that is hidden there in that first name reveals itself down in Tiferet, which is the Sephirah of truth. So you're looking at that idea of a higher countenance there, and then below that idea of a lower countenance that's revealed in terms of truth and Tiferet. So that's just an interesting little, you should never try to make things out of gematria or find, gematria is just going to tell you something you already knew. So in this case, we already know about truth and all this stuff, but it's just interesting that name has that dimension to it. And then you have other names of God, like Yah. That name up there is basically two consonants, the Yud and the Hey, which are the first two letters of the four-letter name of God, that represent the father and mother, or higher masculine, higher feminine aspects of God that are always united. They never separate. And so this idea here is the combined higher Abba, Ima aspect that are united together. So when we say our Father, our God, our Father in heaven, that always includes the idea of the mother aspect, the feminine aspect of God. God is masculine and feminine attributes. We're all made in the image of God, masculine and feminine, male and female, he made us all, is the image of God. So it is not saying, that's the reason we call God Father, is because it's inclusive of the Ima aspect, the Abba is. Whereas if you went the other way around, as some people do, and some groups say, "Oh, God, our Mother," or something, then technically you are not including the Father aspect, which preceded it. So you're causing a division, which is God, that's blasphemy. So anyhow, that's a whole other discussion. Elohim Haim. Now this one's interesting because this is the only time I've actually seen it expressed exactly like this. It's usually an Elohim with an explanation, but I like this because it's Elohim Chaim, Chaim having to do with that whole aspect of life and all. And if you notice the third one, Elohim, which is Bina on the left, and you notice the fifth one, number 5, Elohim again, which is Gevurah on the left, and you go down to number 8, which is Hod, again on the left, all have the name Elohim in them. Elohim has to do with that side of strictness. So number 3, number 5, and number 8 are your 3 Sephirah on the left, which all start with Elohim. So I'm not going to go through all of these in great detail, but you'll have this slideshow. We'll put it in the group. So down below 9 and 10, oh, by the way, Yod He Vav He there in the middle is Tiferet. Tiferet is central to everything. Tiferet is also the name that is associated with the term Holy One, blessed be He, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that whole idea of everything coming together, and when it comes all together, it's that beauty and harmony that Tiferet represents. That's right there in the middle. Yod He Vav He Tzavaot. That's like the almost like the armies of God, and Elohim Tzavaot. So you have the armies or the angelic realm of God on the merciful side, Yod He Vav He, and then you have the angelic forces on the Elohim side. That's why there's 2 with Tzavaot. El Chai is life again, and we saw that earlier. El Chai and Adonai, the last 2, which represent that connection down there when everything 9 and above, all that's above. In fact, Yesod is called kol in Hebrew are all, A-L-L, meaning all above. And then 10, Adonai, is our God, the idea of God with us, the Shekhinah, the godly presence with us. It's the bride that needs to be reconnected. So God of El Chai is God of life. That's also the name Shaddai, which is you see the letter Shin on your mezuzahs, right? The letter Shin stands for Shaddai there, which is also at that level of Yesod, of connecting. I was going to say something else I forgot, but so anyhow, this is an ancient prayer that goes down all 10 Sephirot, and there's different aspects to each of these names of God. Generally, Elohim has to do with judgment, Yod He Vav He, more with mercy. God rules the world with mercy. It's interesting when you read in the Torah, and you start at the very beginning of the Torah, Genesis, the first section before the Garden of Eden, you will see the name Elohim throughout, because God had to create something separate from God. You know, God is perfection, so anything else is going to be a downgrade, right? A step down. So there's this concept here of both separation and evil, if you will, because anything, going the wrong direction is evil. So in that respect, and I think Elisheva is probably going to touch on that later too, there's an aspect of evil right from the beginning, in that it was required for creation. So you see Elohim being the name of God used before the Garden of Eden. Then when you're in the Garden of Eden, something changes. All of a sudden, throughout the text, generally in chapters 2 and 3 around there, you'll see throughout that text that there's a double name, a dual name, which is Yod He Vav He / or hyphen Elohim. Together, a two-part name is used throughout the Garden of Eden, showing that it's kind of an interim reality, if you will. That's part leaning toward Elohim, part leaning toward Yod He Vav He. Then when they come out of the Garden of Eden, now you get introduced to the name Yod He Vav He by itself. And this name appears, I believe, like 6,000 times in the Tanakh, and the rest of the names combine only 3,000. So it is the predominant name used throughout the Tanakh for our reality, because God deals with this world in a merciful fashion, thank goodness, because we don't do things too well sometimes. So thank goodness for that. It's interesting too, though, when you get right into the next parsha, Noah. And we talked about this in a different group, that in Noah, it's interesting. All of a sudden you start seeing Elohim come back again. It's like, well, why is this name coming back? And you see, there's all this judgment going on, right? So there's all this judgment on the world, et cetera, coming on, and it's Elohim, Elohim. And then all of a sudden, God in his mercy tucks Noah into the ark. And what name appears in that verse? Yod He Vav He comes right back. So you see this pattern of all these names and how they're used and their meaning, the specific meanings throughout the Tanakh. And the book, if you feel you're ready for it, or whatever, you can ask me more questions about it later, is Gates of Light, Shari Orah, which goes through all the names of God and the different words and phrases that they're associated with throughout the Tanakh. It's pretty deep. It's pretty interesting too. It creates a labyrinth of connections. It's crazy how many things are connected behind the scenes. But so anyhow, the basic idea here is that these names of God are associated with these 10 emanations. So this prayer, and again, keep in mind that what we talked about at the beginning, connectivity and connection. You have connection before everything. You have connection through the worlds of existence. You have connection with the Sephirot here. It's all about different ways of understanding and relating to connection. I will pause here for a second. Jesse had a question, and we'll take like a 2-minute break to get a drink or hit the bathroom, and then come back with a little bit more of my stuff. And then later we'll have a little bit more of a longer break, and then we're going to go off going. What's that? It's going to be late night tonight. I hope you guys are ready for this, because we get some crazy stuff later. It's crazier than this. So, Jesse, what was it you wanted to bring up?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. I was curious because I just gotten this. I think I forget when I got this book, about maybe a month or two ago, when I was writing up a report for my speech class. But it's called the Enneagram and Kabbalah, and I was wondering if you were familiar at all with the Enneagram.
Is that by Pearl?
It's by Rabbi Howard A. Addison.
There's another one by a woman authored, Pearl, with the Enneagram. Not that particular book.
But are you aware of the Enneagram stuff at all in general?
Yeah, it's not an area I pursued a whole lot, but yeah.
Well, I was wondering if you would find it interesting in going through some of the stuff here. I'm not meaning like right now, but just I thought that the parallels were very interesting. Where the Enneagram is basically being used as a personality model, but when you look at its history, it was actually probably more closely associated with Kabbalah in general as a model to describe the universe, human characteristics, and the like. And I just thought that the comparisons were very uncanny, especially with the way this particular rabbi was associating each Enneagram point to the various Sephirot, and also in the way in which it kind of directs a person through each Enneagram type as to how they can pretty much work on that particular midot and improve on it further.
I'm unmuted now. Okay, there we go. Yeah, if you don't mind, if you have a good link to post in the group, not here, but in the Facebook group, so we can dedicate a little thread to looking at that. That would be cool. The whole idea, of course, of connecting these things. These are aspects of our persona. Personality, yeah, but even deeper. Stephen Covey addresses this. There's the personality aspects, and then there's the character aspects. So the personality is very exterior and very passing, yet that's what the whole world seems to be concerned with. He points out that most of the literature in the last 50 years is about personality ethic, as he calls it. And I'm just going to mute you, Jesse, because I'm getting feedback. And on before that, like 200 years in our country before that, everything was about character ethic, and we need to get back to that. So the changes we hope to effect through the study of all Torah and the Omer count and all these things to learn and apply, of course, there's so many ways to learn and apply, are all meant to change character at a deeper, permanent level, which I think is what you're talking about, of course, with all of that. It's meant to be something that goes back through time, back to God, etc. So it's much more real, much more permanent, if there's such a thing as more permanent. I want to take a 2-minute break, seriously, like 120 seconds, just to everybody, bathroom break, soda break, coffee break, whatever you got. Let's meet back here in 120 seconds. And the next slide is going to be fun, and a couple more, and that'll be it from me. But we got a couple cool ones coming up. In fact, the idea of these things being represented by some type of image is going to come up regarding the menorah in one of these slides. So, all right, let's take a fast break, and we'll meet here in 120 seconds. Oh, you didn't time me? You're supposed to time me. I ran back. I hustled. Valerie, you were napping? Were you napping in the middle of the slides? That's okay. You're absorbing it, like, What's the word? Osmosis? I don't know what the word is. Osmosis. Yeah, bringing Moses into it. Yeah. So, yeah. All right. So this, we're going to wind back into it. I know people are yelling in the background saying, he said 120 seconds. It's only been 103. I'm going to slowly transition over to the next slide. I could do the humorous thing and say, is anybody not back yet? Wait a minute. Trick question. That's like the one about the bus, where's this stop? Or just get off the one before I do. Yeah. All right. Are you ready for the next one? Because it's gonna get we're gonna get a little strange here. Okay, here we go. On this, what's that? Yeah, Kansas is about to go bye-bye. All right, so this slide we were looking at shows the progression of these Sephirot through a prayer that was designed specifically to do that, which is great. I was reading this particular text one day, and it occurred to me that, well, I'll show you the text. It goes, yeah, whoops, hold on, back. Let's try this again. Oh, I know what it is. I'm not in PowerPoint. I'm in, all right, so Romans 11. Yeah, Paul, our buddy Paul, a Pharisee. Okay. The text is on the left. We've all read the New Testament maybe in this group. If not, that's okay. And it's a nice little admonition, but when you break it down, almost in perfect order, other than Gevurah and Chesed being flipped, it's amazing. It doesn't take a lot of stretching of the imagination to see that Paul is going down a list of things here, more or less, or concepts that relate very well to the same 10 Sephirot. Some of them are crystal clear, and others, as I said, Bina and Da'at are very close in relationship in terms of knowledge, between understanding and knowledge. Is once you get out of Bina, you're there at knowledge. Just like when you get out of Hod, you're there in Yesod. So I found this very fascinating, that this particular text, and seeing his background as a Pharisee rabbi under Gamliel, yeah, he would have, and you see other things in his writings that relate to Kabbalah and Sephirot and all these kind of things. Galatians, he says, Jerusalem above is free and mother to us all, right? Well, if you look in Kabbalistic texts, Jerusalem above and the concept of free or freedom, like the Yovel, and mother above, they all relate to Bina. They all do. So he's got three clear terms related to Bina in that text. In other places too, he writes things that he drops all of these hints. The third heaven, he was taken up to the third heaven. The seven heavens within the level of heaven. It's always plural in Hebrew because there's seven heavens within the heaven. And the third one, what happens there is you get your personal revelation of what your task in life is, and that's exactly how Paul describes the third heaven. So there's all these Kabbalistic things in his writings that are scattered throughout. This one blew me away, and I saved it years ago, and it kind of popped in my head when I did the one before this with that 16th century, 1 through 10 we just looked at. Then I saw this and said, oh my goodness, this is following in a hidden way the same aspect, the same 10. So I don't have a lot more to say on this other than, feel free to go back and look and see if you've got a New Testament. And I don't remember what version this is I picked out of here, but they're all similar. So very interesting thing in terms of this connection. Again, all about connection throughout this text and others. So comments or questions, or we'll move on. All right, so we're going to go to the next slide. I'm glad I didn't lose half the audience with the New Testament connection. This group's pretty cool with it. All right, I need to get back to my guy here. All right, now we're going back to what having the idea of a little bit of imagery. Now, images in the traditions of Judaism are not a good thing in terms of, they can become the focus of idolatrous practices, as in all other religions that have imagery. So you won't find like a direct image representing the Hashem in archaeological finds and things like this. Yeah, idolatry, yes, but not that level apparently. So yeah, standards of idolatry. This menorah shift, it's like a meditation upon something. What you'll find in Jewish tradition is sometimes images are actually formed with letters or words. The hand, the amsa, right? That you'll see with the 5 and the eye in the middle. What was that? Oh, yeah. When you have the hands extended by the priest making the shin, the Leonard Nimoy thing, right? Live long and prosper, which he explained in a video he stole from the Torah, which is great, borrowed from the Torah. So anyhow, this is an interesting one in that this particular meditation, if you will, is upon Psalm 67, and there's all kinds of interesting ideas and theories and histories around this, including the idea that King David actually had this imagery on his personal shield. I don't know how valid that is, but that's one of the stories you'll find out there. So what this is it's got a lot of writing around this particular one, but basically you have, there's 8 verses in the psalm. However, the first one is just the introductory verse, which is similar introductory verse that you find in about 1/3 of the Psalms. And it's interesting because we talked about this, I think, last week. The word for the leader or for the conductor that you see at the beginning of about, I think it's 50 some odd of the Psalms, over 50 of them. Look at it closely, lam natsach, it's netzach. It's the same word or term, root as the sephirah of netzach, which is that proactive spark we talked about to get things in action. And this is interesting because it's also translates in a different way to the one conducting or leading, which is an allusion to God, of course. There's probably an immediate connection to the musical conductor at the time, but it has a deeper application to God, but it also has a hidden connection to Netzah, which is very proactive thing. And it's just like I said, over 50 Psalms start with this. So you don't count the first verse when analyzing this. The next 2 through 8, which is 7 verses, make up the meditation. And it's an interesting meditation for a few reasons, and it's associated with the Omer count for some reasons, one of which is there's 49 words in it. So you have 49 days. In the Hebrew, there's 49 words. I don't know about the English, so don't count those. But there's 49 Hebrew words in it. And the middle verse, which would be verse 5, the longest one, has 49 letters in it in the Hebrew. So that's, who knows, the chicken or the egg came first there. But the psalm is associated with the counting the Omer for the one reason, 49. It's also associated with the menorah for a couple of reasons. The menorah, as you know, was formed in a very singular fashion, right, out of one piece, right? So you have that whole idea of total, complete unity. Then within it, you have these aspects we relate to, but understanding that there's a complete unity between these things, and that the menorah, the menorah was singular in its manufacture. And then another aspect that's peculiar is that the number of words in each verse form a chiasmus, which you go from one point to another, then back, exactly like a mirror image. So in the Hebrew, you have 7 words followed by 6, 6, then 11 in the middle, and 6, 6 again, then 7 at the end. So the verse 2 in the Hebrew has 7 words, then verse 3 has 6, verse 4 has 6, 11 in the middle of verse 5, then back to 6, then 7. And when you lay those out, 7, 6, 6, 11, 6, 6, 7, it forms, if you just put them vertically, it forms like the kind of almost like a outline or shadow image of a menorah, as you have the middle long piece, and then, so and then the outer ones are a tiny bit longer. Just, anyhow, it's pretty cool. And this is some of the teachings around this and why it's related to the menorah. So the whole idea of the menorah and what it represents in the holy place in the temple, the tabernacle, the temple, and the unity of the menorah. And of course, the 7 candles. So you're reciting these things one at a time. You can recite them in different order. It's not even that specific. But the idea of, by reading these verses, it's almost like you don't have a menorah, but you can illuminate it by reading these 7 verses. There's like this mystical connection there. Sort of like studying the temple when you don't have the temple. You can still do something that can connect. So you're connecting to the lighting of the menorah. So just as God brings light into the world, we bring light from God. We become that two-way vessel. We get around the bread of shame thing there, and we become a two-way vessel, also lighting or extending in light by lighting God, into the world. And this can't be done with the menorah now, but it can be done by, studying aspects of it and doing things like this meditation. So that's what this one's about. And it's an interesting prayer in that it has kind of shows also a different type of connection. We keep saying different types of connections with these prayers. This one's interesting because it really intertwines Israel and the nations. This is very much about asking God to bless or increase Israel, but not in a self-centered way, which of course some people who are not nice to Jews always take things and read them the wrong way. Well, this is in the Bible, hopefully they won't, but it clearly addresses Israel saying, bless us, and there's a reason to be blessed. And it's not because we're so great. It's like that your ways will be known upon the earth, your salvation to all the nations. So the idea basically here is, rectifying things, and Elisheva is going to get into that more later, in order to extend it through the earth and eventually through all, fix everything through all of reality. It is a chiasmus. You see it particularly in the middle verses. 4 and 6 are actually identical. So you're kind of leading up to verse 5, that key middle verse here, which almost represents the thou will judge the peoples with equity, and this kind of very futuristic, and then back down again to the end. So it's just a fascinating little psalm, something you can look at, do some research online to see more of the interesting aspects about it. But it figuratively represents lighting the candles of the menorah and helping us to make that another type of connection with God. You'll see the actual image on the right on all kinds of things, t-shirts, coffee mugs. No, seriously, and like other types of Judaica, this emblem, this thing with the menorah and the actual text of the prayers making up the what am I trying to say? The individual columns, are found on other things. So kind of interesting and related to the Omer with the 49 words and 49 letters in the middle there. Generally speaking, the middle branch of the menorah is the Malkut. If you're looking at just the 7, it's the Shekhinah. It's the one in the middle, and has the Shekhinah has. I think Solomon wrote something to that effect. It has 60 guardians around her, something like that, which is the 6 times 10. It's the 6 around it. So the Shekhinah is the middle flame, and then you have the 3 on one side and 3 on the other. Anyhow, it's another interesting aspect of prayer and connectivity. And that will take us to our last one, which we're going to segue in some sort of way out of this prayer. If you've never heard of Ana Bekoach, it is considered to be, I don't know what descriptive word to use. Some would say the most powerful, and I'm not making it sound like witchcraft or voodoo or anything weird like that, but the most powerful prayer in Judaism. And that's not to say, well, you just say it and you get power. No, it's only gonna, it only relates to the one saying it. So it'll be at where you're at, so to speak. But this prayer directly connects to a few things, including the idea of unifying the bride and the groom. There are 42 words to this prayer. Although we count 49 days in the Omer count, you have 40 2 plus 7, so you have 42 days where they travel, and then there's 7 more days leading to the giving of the Torah in Jewish tradition. So you have the 42 here, which is the actual unification of the bride and groom, because the aspect of the groom is associated with the letter Vav, Yod He Vav He, that third letter, which is 6, and the sixth letter, the number 6, and has those 6 emanations we talked about, the 6 Sephirot that relate to the groom. So that's the number 6 relates to the groom. The number 7 is the one below, because it's the 7th. There's not 7 of them, but it's the 7th. And just like the bride circles the groom in a wedding 7 times, that's 7 times 6. She's going around the 6 7 times. So the number 42, something called the 42 letter name of God. You'll see in some text things like this. It's not an actual long name with 42 letters. It's something else. But this idea of the groom and the bride being connected has a sense of power to it, in that everything is lined up, everything is connected. The bride's connected to the groom is connected to the upper emanations of the name Yod, He, Vav, and now the last He is connected. So the name of God is one. So in Zechariah 14:9, I think, he says the name of God's, he doesn't say it, but it's implied, the name of God right now is not one because of sin and this division and the bride being, so to speak, separate from our perspective. But in that day, he says his name will be one, quote, again, or in parentheses, if you will. So it'll be one again. And when that's connected, then the lowest emanation, which is the bride or daughter, is connected to the highest emanation, which is the father, which are the two that are furthest apart. So when you have father, mother, son, daughter, and looking at it like that, you'll see that there's close connections, like between the father and mother are never separated, as we said earlier. And then even between mother and son, there's a strong connection. And then you have the connection between the father and daughter, which is the first and the fourth, the furthest one away, which is the most dynamic one because of that distance, if you will. I personally think it applies to the physical world, fathers with daughters, but that's my own opinion. So the Ana B'Koach is 7 verses, each with 6 words. The picture to the left is the first Hebrew letter of each word, so it goes right to left. So that's an Aleph in the top right, which is for Ana, then a Bet for Bekoach, and then a Gimel for Gedulat. And the translation to the right in English, I kind of merged 2 of them together in that I felt some were a little easier to understand. Ooh, unstable internet connection. Let's hope I don't lose everybody here. Yeah, I know. I'm getting to a good part. The internet's going to get flaky. That's what happened a couple weeks ago, right? So anyhow, this is this prayer, as I said, it's 7 verses. Each one relates to 1 week of the Omer count. So the first week is focused on Chesed. So we'll look at it briefly, and then we'll take a break and get to Elisheva stuff. I don't want to go too late for people here, and we're already, I know we're getting pretty late. I have no idea what time it is. So we're timing it right. It's still, it's still dark out. When it gets light out, you've gone too long. That'll be Shavuot. So the first verse references power of the right hand. Power is generally associated with the left, so to speak, but there's power in everything, including the power of what comes beyond and before Chesed. And I think actually we did mention that briefly last week. So the right hand is Chesed from the right. So it's an appeal to God to mercy, to free the bound. The idea of being bound goes back to the idea of when they were slaves in Egypt. It's nicknamed Mitzrayim, which means a place of being bound or confinement. You can't serve God the way you're designed to serve God when you're, all the problems this world brings. It just makes it so hard. So we're asking God to deliver us from personal sin and issues we have to issues in the world that are impacting us, and we're asking for assistance here out of his mercy. And then it goes to the next one. Again, now you have another idea of empowering and purifying here. So when something's purified, there's a process here that can be, scraping and scrubbing or whatever it takes. So the idea here on the side of Gevura, of judgment and all of that, is one of accepting the song prayer. I like that term. It can be songs and prayers are very similar in the Torah. So accepting, and as we saw earlier when we talked about prayer at the very beginning, we saw it has to do with judgment and proper understanding on the left. So that's Gevura. And then you go to the next one, which calls him a hero, which is interesting, heroic one. And unique, pupil of the eye. These are all very central and things reflective of that centrality of Tiferet. I'm just going down these quickly. And then you get down, what would be next? Netzah would be in the fourth one, which is back to the right side of being proactive, always rewarding them. So the idea of always is another nickname for Netzah, eternity, always, victory, success. Those are all words associated with Netzah. And then back to the left side, number 5, power again. So you're back on the left, which is Hod, okay? In goodness, lead your flock, okay? So that's Hod is the aspect of making, taking the right information and processing it correctly and coming out with the right path, leading the flock. And then the path itself is Yesod, number 6. This says unique and proud one. That's an interesting concept because if you go back to the third one mentioned unique, right? The third one was Tiferet, which associates with Jacob, unique. And then the sixth one is Yesod, which associates with Joseph, his son. And there's said that Jacob and Joseph were practically the mirror images of each other in terms of certain things. So here's unique again, down at the aspect of the Zadik, the sixth one. And then finally, and the concept of holiness there applies too to the Yesod. That's the level of Joseph and choice, especially not only choice regarding ego, but choice regarding purity, things like sexual purity, where Joseph was, he had a lot to deal with. He was about, I guess, the most handsome man on earth or something like that, depending who you believe. And he had quite a following of ladies. And, of course, Potiphar's wife threw herself at him. And all these things where Joseph withstood that stuff to keep himself pure. So the concept of purity is associated very much in Kabbalistic writings with Yesod. So purity and holiness, separation. And then finally, at the end, 7, accept our prayer and hear our cries. So it comes back down to earth, so to speak, where we're crying out to God and praying, kind of tying back to number 1. So it makes a nice little circle there. So the Ana B'Koach is a prayer that is said oftentimes right after the daily prayer of the Omer. Oh, Terry just posted that. I just opened this up. It's included in the Omer count. Yeah, the Ana B'Koach is often said every day of the Omer count along with sometimes even that Psalm 67, the last thing we looked at before. That's not as common, but the Ana B'Koach is. And the Ana B'Koach is also said anytime, I guess, it's a prayer you call upon in certain situations. It's kind of almost like use more... what's the term you use when you have a prescription, but you don't as needed? It's huh? Oh, as needed, yeah, kind of thing. And it has all of these. It has all of these aspects of God within it. The 7 Sephirot are hidden, or if you will, in there as well. But it's a good one to look at in terms of doing some research on Google to stay on kosher sites. So there's some good information about it and how people utilize it. I don't want to take too long with it, but it is considered to be, as I said, the most powerful prayer in Judaism. But as with anything else, you need to know what that means and fully by studying and living a right life and praying a lot. All that stuff's connected. But again, another aspect of connectivity. So all of these prayers, as you see, these things we've looked at in the last hour, all have some aspect of connection or helping us connect to God in all kinds of different ways, or connections between Israel and the nations, or your front door in the world, or the Sephirot, the world's existence, all of these things. It's just different ways we understand spirituality, God and spirituality. So questions, comments? I'm going to be probably wrapping up. Do we want to play an Anna Bacoa song? Oh, so Elishev is going to play, and there's some nice renditions of this put to music. It's actually pretty. There's an established melody for it, and there's actually some nice renditions. But questions and comments now before we listen to that, take a short break. Didn't you do a thing on the Our Father prayer last counting? The Our Father prayer in the New Testament, it's a little bit too involved to bring in tonight. It would have taken a long time. But yeah, there's on 13 Petals website, actually, under the Kabbalah teaching section, I do a thing there with the Modéani and the Our Father, and showing some, I think it's a Modéani and the Our Father, right? Showing some these connections that the Our Father also goes through the stages, the 10 stages as well. Not as directly as the Paul and Romans thing, but it does have these aspects to it also. So yes is the answer to that. I just didn't bring it into this tonight. A couple other things that just would have been too lengthy, but these were the main ones here anyhow. We talked about the last 7. There were 7 of them. How do you like that? These 7 different texts that we looked at are the main ones, in my opinion, to look at, and some good information. So I'll be posting the slideshow separately in the room. We had technical issues I'm still working on with last week's video of this group, of this room. I think I figured out a way. I got to actually do something. YouTube won't let me upload it again because it says, oh, you already uploaded this. So I have to change the video somehow and try again. I don't know what happened to the first one, but I'll get this one loaded, Lord willing, and fix the other one. But the slideshow will be uploaded a link separately as a file. So you can, if you want just the slideshow, you can get just the slides. If you want the whole video with slides and everything else in it, we'll have that too. Comments, questions, anything else? Anything on these prayers or how they relate to the Omer count or anything else? We've still got, we've still 16 people here. This is good. So we're going to take a brief intermission. We're going to play the Anna Bacoa song. The Anna Bacoa song is going to be just short of 4 minutes, and then we'll probably give everybody. So when the music stops, grab a chair. Now, when the music stops, we'll probably go another minute or two and give everybody a chance to get back to their. And then Elishev is going to take this into the matrix, and it'll be very different than what we just talked about. But and then it'll come back to this at the end. I think that's the goal, but it'll be fun. One of the things she's doing tonight too is covering some ancient aspects and psychological aspects, and also leading to the idea that we're hoping down the road this summer, as I mentioned, to create a prayer intention group, which is going to be another interesting experiment, if you will. And this is kind of laying some deep foundation down for that and hoping to develop that in the months ahead. So that's the plan, at least. And I'm going to say bye and get a drink. I'm going to stop sharing so she can share. So we're going to have a lovely song here. This is the Anna Bacoa to music, and then we'll be continuing. So talk to you in a few minutes. I heard you.
אנא בכוח גדולת ימינך תתיצאוה קבל רינת עמך סגבנו תרנו נורא בכוח גדולת ימינך תתיצאוה קבל רינת עמך סגבנו תרנו נורא נא גיבור שייכותך כגבת שומר רחם תרם רחמם צדקתך תמיד גומלם חסין קדוש חסין קדוש ברוב טובך נהל עדתך יחיד גאה לעמך פני זכות קדושתך שבתנו קבל ושמע צעקתנו יודע
Yeah, I have to give permission. You know, you need to mute your sound. Sound okay? Let's see. Okay, so welcome everyone. This is my portion following Tovia, which is not an easy thing to do. So my personal and professional life overlap greatly because my interests really play a huge role in my work. I work as a psychiatric nurse, and so many years ago, when I heard about the psychological aspects of the Kabbalistic system, I obviously was very, very keenly interested in what it had to say. So this is kind of a synthesis between this idea and another idea, which was brought out in the wide world about using meditation based on more Buddhist techniques to bring about a healing. And there have been some clinical studies, which I'm going to do a further, more elaborate one in the future. But when I was in nursing school many, many years ago, I learned that just by praying for people or even focusing positive thoughts, and a few clinical trials that the results were actually in favor of positive results. So the interesting thing is, if you think about somebody, if you don't even have to pray, you just have to think positive thoughts, or even put their name into your mind, and people's outcomes actually vastly improve over the control group where they didn't have that done for them. And it's interesting that this woman took this research and she wanted to apply this to the real world. And so she started these groups called intention groups, which were meant to bring this positive energy to people in the wide world. So, reading this, like, how does this work? Why does it work? What is the spiritual basis based on a more kosher Kabbalistic view? And so this is kind of this idea here. Some of the groundwork about prayer and why this intention group, or even focusing your mind and your thoughts towards somebody in a positive way, would actually cause improve physical outcomes for individuals. So, so I don't know if Tovi's going to monitor the chat, so I can if they have any questions, you can go on the mic, or Tovi will let me know. So this is, I love pastels, and if you're a Rorschach kind of person, then you can obviously. Why isn't this isn't working? There we go. I'm not putting these fancy things in. They just happened on their own. So this idea of prayer is underlying what is the principle. So one of the things that the Ram Call, who's one of my favorites, obviously, teaches us is that when you use a terminology, you really have to define what does it mean. So when you say prayer, rectification, Messiah, all these words convey very elaborate concepts within Judaism. So when we're talking about rectification, it's a repair, it's a return back to a state where we originally were. And so the implication in that idea is that we are all originally one with God in this purified state, but the physical state, where we find ourselves now, is fallen and disrepair. So where did this reality come from? How did this world get to be such a mess? And it's actually built into the system. It's the construct. It's the structure of the world to degrade. In physics, it's called entropy. And in the Kabbalistic terms, it would be called the shattering of the vessels. So there's this idea of primordial existence, when God, the entity, the Ein Sof, we'll just use the word God because that's the word we use. When this entity wanted to create a sense of otherness, to give the possibility of a creation that has consciousness and the ability to connect. For that to happen, there has to be evil, but we know God contains no evil. So how does a perfect unified existence, such as God, create a separateness and a sense of otherness, which is evil? And this construct was brought about through this idea of the shattering of the vessels, creating a physical space for otherness to exist. And this is called the Shivrat HaKalim. The Keli is the vessel. And when this first otherness, this, way beyond what we can even comprehend as our physical existence, came into being, it was created with a dual purpose. The dual purpose, the primary existence, was to be a receptacle, to receive this energy that would flow from this perfect oneness. The other part is for it to shatter, fail, and fall, and that is where we get the concepts of chaos, tohu, and bohu, which is the emptiness, or the vessel that's empty that needs to receive. In this first existence, though, the vessels were created whole and they could receive, but they couldn't transmit. So if you think about like a balloon, a water balloon that you fill, there's only so much it can take before it bursts. And so this is the world of points. In Kabbalah, it's called Nekudim, this world of points. They exist and they have all the attributes within them and they're perfect receptacles, but the point is they can't interact with each other, and therefore they shatter and fall. So you get the world of chaos, the Olam sorry, I'm a little, you get the Olam Tohu, and then you get the Olam Lom HaTikkun, the world of repair. So the world of repair are the vessels that have been shattered, and the chaos, that's the energy and the fallen sparks that exist. And they precipitate down into our world. Actually, they precipitate in what we would call the Ein Sof, and then the Ein Sof precipitates even further into what we would call Keter, which is the beginning of our world of existence. So because this flaw, there's a fundamental flaw. So that flaw is built into the spiritual DNA of what creates our world. So we see at the beginning in the book of Genesis that we have the 6 days of this tohu bohu, the formlessness and the void, or the chaos and the vessels, being rectified to a state where reality, where an other can be brought into existence, and that is Adam and Eve. And so all the 6 days of creation are taking these primordial energy and reforming it into our creation, and to the point where things are rectified or repaired to such an extent that an atom or conscious being can be created. Now, in the beginning, Adam was this unified being, as was the Garden of Eden. There's many midrash that say Adam was male and female, and we see in Genesis where Adam and Eve are separated into two distinct beings. And then you see there's also midrashim that the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life are actually one tree. So when Adam and Eve are separated, so too are the concepts of chaim, life, and knowledge of good and evil, this distinctness between the two. So while this flaw that's built into the system creates evil, it also gives individuals, specifically man, this consciousness, the reality of the world, the ability to connect and perceive God, and to have a ratzon, a will of his own that he can exert and choose to either direct towards God or direct towards evil. So when we talk about the shattering of the vessels, there are only, and we're going to use the 11 Sephirot. There's normally just 10 Sephirot when you take them together, but there's one special place where you see all 11 brought together, and the 11th, the one that is either included or not included, is Da'at, or knowledge. And so when you talk about these three vessels, the mind of God, you have Keter at the top, Chokmah, and Binah. They were not affected by the shattering, but when this world was broken, there was a transient existence of Da'at that was included in the 10 to make an 11th one. And the best example of that you can see in the Ketoret, which is the incense that were burnt. And there's 11 spices. One is a putrid, stinky one, and the rest are all pleasant. And so you see this mirrored in the idea of this rectification, everything being brought together. And you see when you use the incense in an improper way, like Nadav and Abihu, you get some pretty horrendous results. So the rectification of the shattering, you see this evil, it has to be repaired. So the vessels are broken, even though they're brought into our existence. Every aspect of the Sephirot have a fundamental flaw in our world, and that is that they're incomplete. They need tikkun, they need repair. And so the rectification for the parts who fail to overcome this flaw is for them to receive and give and act as a partnership, and they create different realities. One word is hanhagos, our realities. The other is the partsufim, which are archetypal personas. And we, we have remnants of this in our, like say it, subconscious, where we're really attracted to these archetypal images. A lot of mythology, our common, popular literature and movies, you see a lot of common themes that people are drawn to. And as a result of this, this is implanted with everybody, within every human being, because we reflect the characteristics and the attributes of God. Our reality, our personality is comprised of these attributes. Our physicality expresses in the physical world these attributes, in the hands and the feet, in the way that we act. All of these things, there's our expressions of the Sephirot within our soul, within the physical world. And let's see here. Yeah, I'm trying to, this isn't working the way it's supposed to. How do I, let's see, I might have to escape. There we go. Okay. Oh, what's going on here? Oh, it's got that silly transition thing. So we talk about how are these parts of Fim reflected in man. You have the lower Sephirot being expressed in the form of emotions, and the way that our emotions are processed in our own mind, what we call personality. So how we handle, and how the buffer between us and the world is our personality, and what drives our personality are the emotions behind that, how we process the emotions of others, how we process our own emotions. And so we going back to the idea of evil. So this introduction of evil by God originally into the system to give Adam and Eve a sense of otherness, to give them an arena to do avoda, the service that they needed to do, so they could become the rectified vessels, just like the partsufim, that they could become interrelated, giving and receiving to each other, giving and receiving back to Hashem. And so the evil was created to bring about the possibility of choice, their ratzon, their will. And we see this mind of God. So Keter, Hokmah, and Binah is known as the mind of God, the intellect. And it devised I would say, temporary existence, a temporary reality, which we call the At. Now, because this world is lower than the preceding level, it's considered evil. It's a lower world. But this is the venue, Da'at. Living in Da'at is where Adam and Eve were meant to repair and rectify, and they would eventually repair these vessels, and they would be reincorporated into the system, and Adam and Eve would be reincorporated into the system in a rectified manner. And then you get to this idea of these infinite levels above Keter. When you get into the actual existence at the level of the Ein Sof, existence at that level, there's absolutely no end. Are there any questions so far? Because I think Tovia is out foraging right now. Okay, so let's see if the next page, it does not work.
Hello?
Okay, slideshow's not it's okay. And you're welcome to jump on the mic too if you have any questions. So we get into this idea of repairing the worlds. This is the actual rectification. So Adam and Eve are created with the blueprints of a previous world meant primarily to be a receptacle, but also to fail. And we see Adam and Eve repeating this pattern in the Garden of Eden. They are living at the level of Da'at, when all of the lower worlds exist as one in this reality, which we cannot even comprehend. The idea that, chesed and gevurah, loving kindness, or good and evil, or just external concepts that don't really drive. This is an existence that we can't really comprehend. So it's more of a thought exercise. So Adam and Eve are living in this temporary state of Da'at. The lower worlds are all contained within this reality. But Adam and Eve, as we know, fail. They default to the secondary function, which is to fail, and they fall. So they shatter Da'at. The lower worlds precipitate and they prolapse into these separate points. Now we have a replica of the previous existence, which is the Olam HaTohu, this world of chaos, where we now have these separated separated Sefirot, Gevurah and Chesed, Tiferet, and all of these precipitate from Da'at into our world, and they're disconnected. And so you can see the fact that they're disconnected, idolatry and abuse of the spiritual system comes endemic in mankind shortly after the fall. You see them building the Tower of Babel and utilizing this knowledge and separating these aspects of God and using them in idolatry or avodah zarah. So there is a rectification and a repair that takes place, because the world is to the point where it's going to be destroyed. We saw that as the energy of God's light filters down to the system, there's only so much that creation can withstand in receiving from God, which is pure chesed, before it fails and shatters. Same is true with Gevurah. Either one will destroy the world. So we have this idea of reconnection, repairing the Sephirah one at a time to reestablish connection, like a electrical circuit that's repaired so the energy can start flowing properly. So it's at Chesed. And Isaac, you can read down here, Isaac at Gevurah, Jacob at Tiferet, Moses at Hod, Aaron at Netzach, Joseph at Yesod, and David at Malkut. But the interesting thing is, if you examine the life of these people, you see that their tikkun, their repair, was not quite completed. We can go down the list. Abraham, he with the advice of Sarah, took his handmaiden and had Ishmael. And so he doesn't completely repair the level of chesed, because he falters, he falls, and he creates a different reality, which is Ishmael. Isaac, he fails to see his son Esau as a rasha, as an evil person, and rebuke him. Jacob failed to rectify and bring back into the fold Esau. And there's a midrash that says he had an opportunity to do this if he had married his daughter Dinah to his brother Esau, and that did not happen. He actually hid her. Moses almost made it, and then he struck the rock. Aaron, he falls at Mount Sinai with the golden calf. Joseph, he almost makes it, but when Potiphar's wife comes to him, he has a moment where he almost fails, and because of that, Yesod is not completely rectified. And we see David has multiple failures with Tamar, his daughter, and his son Absalom. So we can see that they do a partial rectification at these levels, but it's not complete. And we see that these tzaddikim actually default to the secondary purpose, where they don't destroy the world, but it's not a complete rectification. So the next thing, this idea of this incomplete repair has its own ramifications for us. The repair, if it's incomplete, means that evil has an entry point. As they're not completely sealed off and rectified and made a complete vessel, then now there's a part for evil to come in place. When there's any deficiency, that is evil. But conversely, that gives us the opportunity to partake in the repair of all of these worlds. And as we're a reflection of all the Sephirot, we have connection to each midot, to each sephra, and we have the ability to repair that, to add to repairing this kili, this vessel, in our own unique way. And so this vessel, this connection affords us this opportunity that only you have, only I have, because of our circumstances, the challenges, the blessings, everything that we have in this idea of hashgacha, which is divine providence, which is the way that the energy flows into our world, brings about the end that God desires, and you're a part of this. And so you have a unique set of circumstances, personality. You reflect the Sephirot in a different way than anyone else, and therefore you have a unique connection to these Sephirot, and you have the ability through your avoda, your service to God, to repair them. And so we talked about this, if you're in the Ramchal study, that there's this idea that the work that I do or the failures that I make affect everybody. In the idea that Israel, everyone is related to each other, our souls are united, and this is a really important construct that runs throughout the Torah. You see that when judgment falls on everyone. When blessings come, blessing comes to everyone, and God judges, and it's this interconnectivity that brings blessing, that brings the high priest is I say the exemplary of this idea, in that his actions, his service can bring what's the word I'm looking for? Sanctification, repair. He brings offerings and sacrifices on behalf of Israel that brings them to a higher spiritual status. And it's only their kavana, their intent to connect to him. They're not doing the service, but it's accounted to them as if they were. So we see this interconnectivity as being very important to how the Torah works and how our world works as well. So the Partsufim. So this is idea of this persona, these archetypal persona that are created by God, and this is for our benefit. So you look at the Partsufim. This is from Tovi. Are there any questions or anything you want to keep in the chat? Oh yeah, okay. So the idea of this Partsuf involves the awakening from below. So this is God reaching out his hand to bring us back to our previous sanctified, unified, holy status. So the interesting thing is we mirror this idea of the shattering of the vessels, just like Adam and Eve and humanity mirrors this. We individually mirror this concept as well. In the womb, the Torah speaks about, and in the Midrash it says that we're taught all of the Torah. We're able to see the connectedness of God. We're taught all of the Torah. But at the moment of birth, boom, the angel smacks us in the face, shatters that knowledge completely, and we only retain sparks of this knowledge, and it's buried within the shells of our unconscious mind. And so if you look at the Partsufim, or the idea of how you would order these Sephirot, you can see there's 3 levels. You have the mind of God, which is Chokmah, Bina, and Da'at, and then you have the next set, which is your emotions, finally with the world of actions, which is at Malkut. And so we have the conscious mind, and that's most of us live at this conscious level of emotions, of emotive aspects, and in the world of action. Very rarely do we make it to that level of intellect, or really truly understand what motivates us to act as we do. So The Partsuf is characterized by its ability to combine disparate elements into a unified whole. And this is a reflection of man. Mankind, because he contains physical and spiritual attributes, is able to take the concept of evil and chesed, of gevurah and chesed, of evil and good, into one being. So one entity, mankind, can conduct himself in a fashion of doing good works or doing evil. And this is reflected in the Partsufim as well. So the idea of this unified man, this idea of this perfect wholeness is the Partsuf Shalom. It's a complete persona containing all 10 Sephirot completely working together in harmony. And this Partsuf contains the 248 limbs and 365 nerves and veins, which parallel the physical structure of man. And if you do further study, you'll see that this is how we connect to God. And the Anavakoa talks about, untying the bundles and clearing the channels. And this is the idea that we're doing this as we connect. We're bringing life into our spiritual self. That as an action we do, whether it's a Torah commandment or a good deed, reconnects a nerve or a vein and brings further life into our spiritual self. And so, because these Partsufim are the rectification and how we be not only our receptacles to take, but also to be givers, Partsufim give us the spiritual counterpart to fulfill that action, that we can overcome the idea of just living. Our existence comes from God without we didn't earn it. We're here because of God's chesed. So we can overcome this idea of chesed, the bread of shame, become worthy of the good that God wants to give us by becoming first to repair a keli, our own vessel, but we can become a spiritual counterpart by reflecting back the attributes of God. And we do this through the emotive aspects of ourselves. And those emotive aspects stem from the Partsufim. And so these represent different aspects of God's relationship with mankind, and they are anthropomorphic, so we understand them. We understand mother, we understand father, son, bride, groom. These are concepts that we can connect to. They've been placed in our world so we can understand these ideas. Because if you steal a line from the Matrix, a word is only a word. It denotes a connection or a concept or an idea. So the Partsufim they are anthropomorphic, but they relate a concept or a connection, a way that we can see Hashem. I'll take a moment here in the chat. Yeah, okay, loving the neighbor. It says, that's why I say also, love your neighbor also means to do mitzvot, repair, and not bad, because by doing bad or good, we hurt our neighbor and ourselves. Very, very, very true. It gives us a motivation to look out for others, or to root out evil and deal with it, and as the Torah commands. Let's see here. So next. Okay, so we're getting more into the ideas of let's get this lovely fade thing, more into the idea of the Partsufim. So this is a quote from Ariel Bar-Zadok. He can be a controversial man, but it's a very beautiful quote which kind of summarizes the emotive aspect and the role that it plays in mankind. So this is a quote. The power in question here is the power of focused emotion. Nothing translates from potential to actual other than through the power of emotion. The mind is the engine, but the emotions are the gasoline that makes it run. The mind is the book. The emotions are the reader who embellishes the book and giving it life. In Kabbalah terms, the mind is the upper triad of the Sephirot of the crown, Keter, Hokmah, wisdom, and Bina, understanding. The emotions are the 6 Sephirot of Zeir Anpin, which is Chesed, mercy, Gevurah, strength, Tiferet, heart, Netzach, victory, and Hod, glory, also Yesod, foundation. Only when these are combined, which is Yesod bringing it all together, that we manifest Malkut, or kingdom, the never-ending story of life and creation. So it is actually our personality, how we interact with the world, the buffer system that we create in ourselves, which is a combination of, we have a vicious animal. So the personality, which is built through our own predispositions and through our environment, this is a direct manifestation of Zeir Anpin. These six Sephirot comprise our system of how we relate to the world. And so it's at this level where most of us struggle, and it's this level where most of us are influenced either by good or by bad. And that's the idea on Shabbat, when you have the angel of blessing and the angel of curse, and you want to make sure that your influence is going to be from the side of Chesed and not from the side of Gevurah. And so this is a very important level to understand, and a lot of Kabbalah is based on the psychological aspects of man and how to do the tikkun at this level. Because if our emotions are out of whack, if our emotions are imbalanced, if we're ruled by one at all times and not another, then we have a very unhealthy buffer system. We have a very unhealthy way of relating to the world, and therefore we reflect that image back to God, and the image of God is skewed and distorted, and we have a very skewed and distorted and unhealthy way to relate to God. So therefore our avoda, our service, is also going to be corrupted as a result of this. So let's see, next one. Getting into the idea of intention in prayer. It's control. Stop. This lovely fade thing. Okay, so he says, this is another Ariel Bar Zadok quote, we must recognize the words of prayer by themselves never ascend anywhere. It is only the intention of prayers that rise it up to heaven. Intent is power. Intent is the combination of the thoughts of the mind united with the passion of the heart. Prayer must be intentional and not just arbitrary. Those who merely recite words may fulfill their religious obligations according to the letter of religious law. However, they have not fulfilled their obligations to pray to heaven. The laws of man and the laws of heaven differ greatly. Prayer is a matter of heart, and that's tiferet. Therefore, if there is no heart, then there is no prayer. It is that simple. Prayer is a powerful tool in our hands, and some say it is our only tool in the war against injustice and evil. I might tend to agree. So this idea of tiferet, which is the synthesis of all of these higher forces into actual action, which filters down to Malkut, this is important. And the idea is when we're born and this knowledge, this wholeness, this understanding is shattered and buried within our subconscious, within our personality, that we have to put the puzzle pieces back. And we have everything we need to do that. And as we rebuild this ladder, this structure, to resemble what it looked like before it was shattered, this is the idea of tikkun, repair. And as we repair ourselves, we're repairing the aspects of our spiritual connectivity, and understand there's a spiritual aspect of us that is in the heavenly realms, the upper worlds. And as we repair the lower worlds, and it's rectified and connected to this upper spiritual self as well. So this emotional dysfunction is a very, very important thing to focus on, and a lot of Kabbalistic teachings revolve around how to repair those aspects of yourself. And next, fade. So the final rectification of da'at. So we say, as we rectify da'at, as we rectify the lower worlds, we're building a ladder, starting with Malkut. Most of us, it's very common teaching that we're born with the nefesh. We're me, give. Babies are the most selfish individuals on the planet. They don't care if they've only been sleeping for half an hour. If they have something they need done, they're going to cry and make it known. They're not going to say, gee, I'm going to let my parents sleep for another hour, or, I really put my mother through a hard day, so I'm just going to hold off on crying all night and maybe sleep for 4 hours. That doesn't happen. It's not in their construct. It's not in their ability. And if babies had that aspect, they wouldn't survive. So we go from a place of pure give, take, to try to get to this balance of give and take, this perfect harmony between the two. So as we saw with Abraham, Isaac, and all of the Tzaddikim that came before to rectify this, the final rectification, the one that hasn't been rectified, is actually da'at, and that's the original world that was shattered. So we know that all of these lower worlds have to be repaired before da'at can be rebuilt in the fashion of what it looked like previous to being destroyed. So there's an interesting, this is a quote from Abu Lafia, and I thought I would include it because there's an interesting idea that surrounds with the ultimate rectification of da'at. And I'll read it. He says, thus again, whereas the sons of Abraham who engage in sorcery and astrology have no cognizance of the status of these princes, the princes are the Sephirot. It is through these princes, that is, through a recognition of God's providence via the Sephirot, that the name is united and corporealized. Immediately thereafter, Abu Lafia continues, and know it from the 72-letter name, which is the name of your son, and it is the secret of the three, and the unity, the secret of the 111. This hints to the dew that in the future, the Holy One, blessed be he, will revive the dead through the knowledge of his name. It is a secret of redemption, 3 times these, which are half of 200. I'm not going to continue reading, but he goes into the name of the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey, finally being brought together and rectified. And he implies not only does it bring about the resurrection of the dead, but it's interesting. He says this will only come about when the 72-letter name is brought about in flesh into our own physical world. And so, and it comes to the sun, and actually it continues, and it says that the corporealization, the physical reality of the sun being manifested in our world is actually the upper level, the idea of the active intellect of God, which is Chokmah, Bina, and Da'at, coming down into our world in a physical way and bringing about an ultimate rectification. So that when you get to the end of this rectification, when you hit that process, you become this unified whole. You become this word, Partsuf Shalem, the Shalem Partsuf. You become this complete rectified whole. And so when we hit this idea of rectifying Da'at, that is the final rectification for everything. But the other implication for this is, just as Adam and Eve have damaged the physical world to the point where they need to die, their final rectification is set for them to be even lowered. They have to precipitate, they have to lower themselves through death to ultimately be rectified. We find that there is a renewal. There has to be a renewal of all of these sephirot for the final reality, the final rectification to take part. So what does it have to do with anything? And this is the idea of our worlds being a chiasmus. There's a poetry and a beauty within creation. And that poetry and beauty is that we are reflective of not only the pattern that Adam and Eve fell into, but we also have this built into us from the very beginning of the foundations of creation, reality, and otherness. And so this is a beautiful slide from Tovia. We see that there's a shattering, the vessels are reconstituted, Adam is created, he shatters them, the patriarchs kind of bring them together, and we get to our current state. Ultimately, we rectify our soul, and the souls that are rectified come together and rectify this world and the spiritual worlds. And then our existence is elevated, and the ultimate repair comes, and that is at the level of Da'at. When Da'at was repaired, then everything is great. That's the reset button. Da'at was a temporary condition, never meant to be in existence of anybody it was not meant to be a permanent existence. So we're kind of trapped in this temporary world, and it's falling apart. Like any temporary shelter, ultimately it's not going to last. And so that's the idea of Da'at. Da'at does not want to be here. It wants to go back to its creator. And mankind reflects that in this yearning to go back to an existence that of unification, of beauty, of oneness, of peace, of love. We have this built within ourselves, and this is because we have, this is Da'at, this yearning to go back to the source. And so when you talk about Jewish meditation, we're not going to be separating these sephirot from themselves. That is actually what causes destruction. When you take and you only focus on one and you don't do it within its connectivity to the other in the system, that is bringing you back to the world of points or the nekudim, and that causes damage in the spiritual world and also to your psyche. So, and you can see this manifested. There's some people who have they're just judgment. They're just angry all the time. That's their view of the world. They always view the world through anger. So they're quick to judge. They're rash. They have temper problems. They don't have a lot of, they don't connect. They don't interrelate. They become isolated. And you can see this is a result of them not having this interconnection in their own system. And so, are there any questions here? I see a few. I don't have the chat box open. Let me see here. Do you want to take the mic, Valerie?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Okay, 1 second. Okay. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, you can? Okay. Ready?
Ready.
Okay. Okay, so it's really weird because we were just having this conversation today, and I want to throw my thoughts at you. It's so hard to do it on Facebook. I'm not a good per se writer, so I'm just going to give you my thoughts. You talked about the rectified whole. So there's two camps, it seems. Go figure. One camp says that the spark of Hashem never ceases to exist. Another camp says that the real bad Russia, few people, the evil will cease to exist. My thoughts on this is that it's not black and white like this. It's a combination of both camps. You say rectified the whole, so, and I'm thinking out loud here, so that we know we have partial Gilgul, and that in our life the good part goes on to, I'll say, Gan Eden. The part that still needs rectified comes back into a body with other rectifieds, with all partial Gilgul souls. And it keeps going on as you keep refining and refining and repairing until the time of Mashiach and the world to come. So when it says to rectify the whole, that the parts that were good and did their job will then be rectified, brought together, made whole, and the parts that were completely Rasha will then cease to exist. So it's kind of a combination of both camps. I did not say the spark of Hashem would cease to exist. I said that the part that was completely Rasha and through all the Gilgul, that got worse and worse and worse, the evil will cease to exist. And I would back it up with Torah, the fact that they say that Korach was a Gilgul of Cain. He never rectified. He did the same thing over again. And he was to be at that point, I don't even know how to say it, but if it wasn't for the prayer of somebody else, that would have been, he was done. He was just done. And there is writings in the other camp that do say that if you have 3 Gilguls and you've never done anything righteous at all, no mitzvahs, I find that hard to believe by any human, that you're done. Okay, there's my thought process. Help me out here.
Sorry, I was having a hard time unmuting. Very good, very, very good point. The interesting thing is I didn't post it because it was actually like it was a whole chapter, but there's a book that I'll have Tovia help me post some of the excerpts from it. And the idea is that in the future, the ultimate rectification, the ultimate intercessor for the world is surprisingly Isaac, who embodies pure Gevurah. And the question is why, what is that point? And there's a very deep and there's a lot of information that this is a separate slide, this separate presentation I'm working on. There's a lot of ideas behind the role of evil Gevurah in the world. So if you look at Da'at, where there's this perfect balance, this perfect symmetry between Keter, Chokmah, and Binah, there's perfect symmetry, and in a perfectly symmetrical world, no otherness can exist. So to offset that, to bring an imbalance into the system, you have this extension of Ketur, which is called Da'at. And within Da'at, we see the knowledge of the tree of good and evil, and we have the tree of life, we have Adam and Eve, we have the male and female Nachash, and we have this reality that has imperfection, but just it's the perception of imperfection. It's not integrated into the system. Gevurah and Chesed are considered separate entities at the lower levels, but at the level of Da'at, there's absolute oneness. And so the idea of Gevurah is a flame, and Rabbi Steinsaltz goes into this beautiful teaching about how the flame is never diminished when it spreads, and it points upwards. And again, Chesed is water, and Gevurah is fire. And as a result of this, what you have is this desire of this evil realm. It is the holy manifestation of Gevurah is this desire to go back to the source. So if you look when Adam and Eve were one and everything was balanced and those lower Sephirot were contained within and Da'at, this was a perfect balance of them wanting to return to God, but they also had the other aspect that was tugging at them, which is to know more, to explore this curiosity. So I've always wondered, and as the teaching is in the world to come, the physicality, and this is opinions. There's some opinions that say physicality goes away in the Olam Haba, in the world to come, but there's a lot of that teach that there's a remnant of physicality that exists in the Olam Haba that gives us this separateness, so we can actually enjoy and understand this good that God is giving us, and we can enjoy the pleasures of the world to come by retaining some physicality, which affords us the ability to understand the goodness that we're receiving. And so the interesting thing in this means that there is a place for deficiency in a rectified state in the world to come. And yeah, Steinsaltz is just a brilliant teacher. So he says that ultimately evil is what destroys the world or brings deficiency and suffering, but it's also the mechanism that ultimately will repair the world. It's not going to be chesed. Chesed is only expansive. It doesn't have an end. Chesed just overtakes everything. There is going to be an end to this world, the fallen world. There's going to be a termination point where everything is brought back and rectified. And so the idea of, are people completely destroyed? That's a really good question. When you read the Ramchal, his idea is that what do you call it? The idea of the laws of thermodynamics, that energy is neither created nor destroyed. It just changes form. And so the spark that God puts within an individual that gives them life, even if it's the barest essence of a spark, it's like a dying ember, that energy is returned to God. And there's an idea that a burning or this energy, and if you think about the fires of Gehenna, this energy is being returned. When you fire, you get light, you get heat. So the original substance might be consumed, but it's transformed into heat and the light. So the fires of Gehenna seem to transform the energy, even of the Rasha, back to the source, as almost like a korbanot, like the burnt offering that the high priest would bring. So it's almost like these evil individuals aren't worthy enough to get into the world to come, and their spark and their essence and their energy is returned back to God. But their consciousness, their ratzon, their separateness doesn't exist in the world to come. And there's the idea that you go through that when the entrance to the Garden of Eden was guarded, one of the entryways into that world is what we would call Gehenna. I don't know if that answers your question at all. Let's see here. Okay, so this, and Tovia will have to remind me, if you can, write a note that I put that Adin Steinsaltz chapter on this one, because it's really important, and it really brought about a different aspect of Gevurah, which I never understood. So you can see the chiasmus, the beautiful pattern that's within existence. And so we talked about the 12 tribes and the Shema, and this is a meditation cube here. You see, this is from Sefer Yetzirah. It's not a very good rendition. It's the best I could find without having to draw it myself. So there's this idea that Gevurah gives us the world of beauty that we have. So Tiferet is this synthesis between Chesed and Gevurah, and it brings about beauty. But ultimately, the world that we live in is leaning towards the side of Gevurah. So every time you see a leaf that's not the tree trunk, or a bug that's not an elephant, then this is Gevurah. This is the synthesis of restriction, of constriction, of form and function in our world, and that is the aspect of Gevurah at work. This is the application of Gevurah. Now, the deepest one that's built within the system is this idea of 12, and you see this reflected in the months of the year, the zodiac, the signs of the zodiac, which are called the mazalot. and the angelic realm that organizes around the mausoleum are these nodes, these points that we see within the heavenly sphere. And in the settling of the land of Eretz Israel, I think it's Ezekiel chapter 48, you see that there are boundaries set by the 12 tribes. And so there, Abu Lafia, I've referred to him earlier, he had this meditation idea, this idea that there are boundaries, there's 12 boundaries. And when you put the boundaries together, they form a cube. And this is the one of the forms of meditation that that Abu Lafia, Rabbi Abu Lafia, taught. And it's utilizing this idea of restriction, constriction. It's taking Gevurah and it's sanctify, I guess, changing it to good. It's using the constriction, the pathways that Gevurah carves out for us to follow, to actually, it's using the poison to transform it into the cure. And the lowest level, the lowest application of this is taking a mundane or even an unholy thing and transforming it into a holy thing, taking something physical and transforming it into the spiritual aspect. We do this when you eat kosher, when you utilize your home for a mitzvah, when you give your neighbor a ride in your car. You're transforming a mundane aspect, something physical, and you're turning it into a spiritual, into something spiritual. So the meditation is meant to do this for our own self. We are organized just like the world is organized. You see, Israel has the high priest, the center of which is now the Mishkan or the temple. The nations are organized around Israel, and God is organized around all of this function. So we are to take these boundaries, these 12 boundaries, which represent different aspects of ourselves, and they are reflective also of 10 of the Sephirot, and use this to connect to God. And the idea is when you do rectification, it's repairing the vessels, but it's also aligning them like a lock, a key. So if you don't have the proper key, and you go into a lock, it's not going to turn. But if you can change the tumblers in the lock, then the key will work. And so that's the idea: is we're aligning ourselves to allow God to flow in, to unlock a higher level of consciousness. So as we rectify these aspects of ourselves, some people are, they don't have anger. They're nothing but chesed, 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 and that's not good either, because they become a doormat. So when we rectify these emotional aspects of ourselves, they become a powerful tool to focus and intention with kavana, to utilize to a higher level of reality and understanding and consciousness, and ultimately to connect to the very mind of God. And that manifests in ourself. And you see, for me, the greatest manifestation of this ideology is being manifested in Viktor Frankl, in his way of analyzing people and bringing them back to a whole. And so the ultimate goal is to tap into the mind, your own intellect, the mind of God, and understand the motivations that drive you. Few of us in this world get to that level where we actually understand what's motivating us to act the way we do. So that gets to this idea of the intention, this prayer intention group, which is to understand the structure and the function of ourselves and how that relates to the world. And this is the idea of Jewish meditation. So I can close this and I can show you a couple of things. I have a couple of books here. So here is an example. Let's see, nope, too big. So we have an example of the meditative techniques of Abu Lafia, which means that you are disciplining your body and causing it to come under your conscious control, and you're utilizing your voice, which is the manifestation of intellect, emotion, and will coming together in the form of speech. And that's when, Tovia talked about the holy names of God. These names are the keys. They unlock certain things. But if your soul is not, if you don't align your midot, your characteristics in a certain way, the key is not going to work for you. You can, like I said, you can put the key into the lock, but if the tumblers aren't aligned right, then the key's not going to turn. So the idea is you have to do work to align yourself so these keys work to unlock higher levels of consciousness. And so, let's see, there's those other pictures here. I'm having the same problem. I guess I'm going through them. So this is his notes and how they apply them. We have the picture. This is the Birkat Kohanim, understanding how all of these things relate. So using your speech, using to align yourself. That's why these meditative techniques, a lot of them are just vocalizations of different permutations of the name, and it's to bring your nefesh under control. I don't know if anybody is familiar with farming, but one of the things I love are state fairs, and I've always been in awe of the oxen. These oxen could crush a man if they wanted to, yet a person can control them with a tiny little strap that they could literally break if they desire to. So the idea is that like a lot of these things are to align your nefesh to be able to connect to higher sources. So this meditation, this intention, your kavana, making sure it's all focused and utilizing these midot as your friends, as ladders, rungs on the ladder to get you to a higher level of consciousness. But, if you have a ladder and 6 rungs are missing, it's not going to be possible to get to the next level. So you have to do this work to rectify yourself, to bring yourself some repair, to be able to obtain this next level. The interesting thing, though, is that we have at this level, the level of the emotions is the most dangerous level, because this is the level where we're most vulnerable. We see those midot, those sephirot, they still aren't repaired. They're still attributes where they're incomplete. They're still, we ourselves have this reflected in our own character as well. So there are things that we are more prone to. I can withstand, I'm not a drinker, I can withstand alcohol. So, indulging in that is not a vice. But there's other things that I have a hard time saying no to, and therefore I will go to excess. So I have vulnerabilities and I have strengths. And so a lot of, it's interesting that a lot of these, older ancient techniques about, bringing yourself and rectifying these different characteristics in yourself are only starting to come out and being reflected in modern psychology. And you get this idea of a stress vulnerability model, that everyone has stressors and vulnerabilities. Certain stressors nobody really responds to because, hey, I'm not vulnerable to that issue. But I have a pet dog that I really loved when I was a child, and I lost it in a really traumatic way. Now every time I see a puppy dog story on either the internet or I cry, because I have that vulnerability in my past. So I think that part of my owning dogs and rescuing dogs is to rectify that past issue and bring healing and restoration. So that's a silly example, but this is what the idea is. So we have the 3, the way to bring this triads together, as Abu Lafi was implying. There's a lot in Kabbalah that talks about triads, and the triads in ourself is our intellect, our emotions, and our kavana. When they're all aligned, then we can drive in a straight line. We can go where we need to go. We repair the ladder. So you'll look at a lot of prayers are to bring you to the right intent, to align yourself, your kavana, your mind, to bring you into a higher level of consciousness to be able to do the next prayer. The prayer services are meant and they're designed understanding the attributes of man to bring them into alignment, to bring us to a higher level of consciousness and thus a higher level of connectivity. And by doing so, then we'll have something called Ruach HaKodesh. We'll have this divine inspiration to see, oh, this is why it happened. You can understand. It's like climbing to the top of a mountain. You can see everything. You understand why certain things are happening in your life. It may be transient, it may disappear, but there are times where we get these flashes to understand why our life is the way it is, why God put certain trials and tribulations and blessings into our life, and understand how we utilize them. And that is Jacob. That is Tiferet, understanding. He knew how to take all of these various forces, and he was dealing with the most evil person, Laban, on the planet, apart from, at that time, Laban was a very powerful man, and he was able to overcome that evil influence by understanding and synthesizing all of these various aspects together. And so this is the idea of intent and kavana and lining everything. And I think why this woman stumbled upon these concepts and got dramatic results. So my desire, my goal is over the summer to formulate some kind of a kosher structure to do the same exact thing. And you can see why these things would work. So if we're all connected and we're all one and we all are unified at the highest level, when you take that energy and you take that power, visualize a certain person in a certain circumstance, it's not a magic, it's not like a magic genie. It's not, I want this and I want that. It's aligning yourselves properly. Understand, you may not get the answer you're looking for, but you may understand, you may have insight into why things are occurring the way they are. So in this, there's also the idea of hashgacha, this idea of divine providence, that mankind's actions have an effect in the spiritual world, that we're able to change, like the chess game, the spiritual world, and change the structure of the heavenly realms and cause changes. We can cause judgment to fall or blessings to fall through our actions. So therefore, if you have this idea of connectivity and utilize it in a holy way, you might be able to change the outcome of an event. You won't ultimately change, how to explain this? The destination will still be the same. It's just the path to get there will have changed and will be different. So that's why I understand I've talked for quite a long time. Any questions or comments, please get on the mic or type them out. And I appreciate so much your spending time with us tonight till late night. So, Tovia.
Hola.
Oh, sorry.
Wow, nice feedback.
Ah, it was beautiful.
Yeah, yeah, that was some heavy stuff. But we'll talk more. We'll talk more about it. Oh, now you stop sharing. Now you're good. We have the group, of course, on Facebook to post questions, comments, links, etc. I'll be posting the video and the slideshow, and I think it was something from a Dean Steinsaltz we're going to go find, right? Yeah, you got that. So, let's keep this going. This is the room's nice here, but we got we got 230 people or so in the group now, most of whom are obviously not here. So let's keep sharing some of this stuff, get conversation going, talk some more about prayer and these aspects to prayer and connection. And this is something, like I said, we're going to keep developing this thing extensively in the weeks ahead, and explaining it in different ways. A lot of this stuff's pretty complex, and break it down more and develop a whole prayer intention group over the summer, and see where Hashem lets us take that, because that could prove very exciting. So that's the game plan regarding the meditation of divine name. How do I get that book? Valerie's asking. Meditation of divine name. Is that something you? Watch your puppy next to you. You always causing trouble.
Honestly, thought it was like $2 book. Got it on Kindle.
You got it on Kindle, huh?
I think it was very inexpensive Kindle book. May have actually been
through Amazon or through Amazon? I don't know. You have to poke around.
It's an interesting book. He doesn't go into he uses Kabbalistic concepts, but doesn't go into the exact names. Is Ariel Barziga book. Protection from Evil, and then the one that is called The Beginning Discourses on Hasidic God, talking about Isaac. So
yeah. And then you quoted that other book, the Serpent book, which is
so I got that
good luck getting that. Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah. Well, who's the artist for the Anabacoa song before you go into that?
I don't know. It says various artists.
It says various artists.
I get the name of it.
We'll get as close as we can to that.
It's from.
Yeah, I got.
Soul Hasidic song.
Do you have a link you could post in the group?
No, I'm trying to find. So, the best Soul Hasidic song. It's like horribly translated through the best Soul Hasidic song. That might be it. No, how do they spell it? Oh, H-A-S. Yeah, okay, that's what it's called. If you have Amazon Prime or you have Apple Music, so this is the CD. I'll see if I can find it on YouTube. Let's see if I can find it.
want to talk a little bit, or you want me to talk?
Oh, you're hunting for something? Oh, okay. So next week, this is kind of the stuff during this week 3. I'm going to not just be prayer related, but we'll also talk about other things related to Tiferet, because there are other things we don't want to ignore. So there's some good stuff I have from the past and some new stuff. So I'll be posting different aspects of Tiferet. Tiferet's very complex sephira. It's the one related to the 4-letter name of God. But if you take a book like Gates of Light, I mentioned, Shari Ora with the 10 sephirot, about 40% of the book is related to Tiferet. It's amazing that like 40% of the whole book out of 10, 10 chapters, 100%, 40% Tiferet. Because everything connects centrally to Yod He Vav He, that's like the trunk of the tree, as it's called, and represents centrality of everything being in harmony, etc. So there's a lot of complex things that tie to it. So we'll post some different things this week, as well as some prayer-related stuff and the slideshow from tonight. So it will be good. I have trouble with Kindle on a little device too. I have a bunch of books on there too that I struggle reading. I'm a paper guy too, because I have a hard time dog earing my iPhone. It cracks the case when I.
I want to talk about a little bit about
The serpent kills. So the interesting thing about
back to the better half.
Serpent kills and the serpent. I can't. What is it called now?
Serpent kills and the serpent gives life. Is that it?
Yeah.
The original.
Well, it's who wrote that? I got it here
Teachings
somewhere.
of Abulafia, right?
It talks about the different essays from Abulafia.
And you got this through the
high school.
university lending
because I'm
system,
paying
or
thousands
something?
of dollars to go to school. Do I get access to the
Hey,
library?
$1 million go to school for that, and you go.
And I get the library.
Go library books for Kabbalah, yeah.
Anyway, so the idea is that there's different discourses from Abulafia discussing Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, and the premise of a lot of his dissertations, I would say, he was really inspired by Nachmanides. Nachmanides' disputation with Pablo Cristiani gave him was the motivating factor. He felt like the door is open and Christianity was open to hearing the truth. So he felt that Christianity, Judaism, and Islam were all in error. And he discusses the various what is the spiritual root of Christianity? What's the spiritual root of Islam? And what is the spiritual root of Judaism? And ultimately he felt that they had all been corrupted in some way. Judaism had been corrupted from the truth had been corrupted and hidden, and the emanations of Christianity emanates from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and Islam is like a synthesis of both. And so it's interesting. He talks about concepts of the Messiah and how they relate to Judaism, how they differ in Islam and Christianity. And he gets into the really important construct of just how evil truly functions, of the true function of evil, and why evil is causing so much pain, corruption, and suffering in the world. And he gets into this really deep idea of the poison is the cure, and the mechanism for prophecy, the mechanism for prayer, the way that you relate to God is through rachamim, which means that the Gevurah has to reach out and touch you in a very individual way. So he talks about the role that Gevurah will ultimately play in being the mechanism that heals the world. And so it's a pretty deep book. And he talks, in his opinion, he felt that he had this divine inspiration and how Islam and Christianity and Judaism were all going to fit into the picture and how everything was going to become one. And, the teaching of the Torah would be restored. The true understanding, the true da'at of God would be repaired. And he was so sure of this that he went to the Pope in 1280 to tell him that this is the time we can bring about. He saw a window of opportunity to usher in the time of the Messiah, and he was sentenced to death and put into prison. And then very shortly after, the Pope died, and he was set free 28 days later. So anyway, it's a very interesting book, and you can see what motivated him to take this very risky journey to Rome and go to the strongest entity on earth at the time, which was the Pope, and try and challenge him. So that took a lot of chutzpah. So I posted the YouTube song. It has some of the words as well. It's very interesting. I listen to the YouTube version a lot. I think it's the same artist that's singing it. It's a very beautiful rendition of Ana Bechoach. So I will. Yeah, any questions, comments? I know I was joking.
Prayer is obviously this structured prayer. We talked actually with Bazim last year. We talked about the idea of praying out of a book with guidance or certain words and certain prayers. And then there's the idea of just going outside and yelling at God. Just going outside and expressing anything one-on-one openly. So that's all part of prayer. It is. It involves all of our senses, our emotions, our imagination, everything. So it leaves a lot of room and a lot of opportunity to study and apply some of these things here. We live in an amazing time with a lot of information coming out for Torah, like ever before, and try to gather as much of this great info, this great thought together, and focus into prayer, and then take that and focus and expand it out into wherever it may go in a kosher way. That's the hope here. And yeah, the whole idea here is to explode. That's that's messy stuff. But yeah, we'll go back and review, and that's like anything else. You read a book, whatever, you get something out of it, and you go back later, you can look at it again, get something else, or you reevaluate something. And that's the way this all works for us, you and me, everybody. It's just this. So, we're fortunate to have had some good resources come our way over the years, and look at them. So, love sharing stuff with folks, and just also don't mind just talking at people, like the input and hearing questions and comments, because it always opens up the path. So we're not teacher types. There's way too much of that out there. So, I'm muted.
What?
You didn't tell me I was muted all the time.
Oh, I didn't know you were muted. No. Sorry.
That's all right. I thought you were listening for me. I didn't see I was muted, and all of a sudden,
I think I wasn't muted, so they probably heard you.
Well, they probably heard me in the back.
So I've got a
The most
couple.
incredible thing I've ever said too. So I forgot.
This is a lot of text. I'm gonna try and figure out where the page breaks are.
Yeah.
But it's I'll give it to Tovia to post.
Yeah. Way in the background. You have to turn this part up loud later. No, just reiterating stuff. No biggie. So, all right. I guess we're going to say thank you and good night to everybody. Unless there's something else, you can feel free to PM either of us anytime if there's a private message you need to share or post in the group. Let's get some synergy going there. Tonight is Chesed of Tiferet, so it's the proactive get up and go. Let's make it start thinking about things. First day.
Oh, Terry has a question.
Questions are good. Terry, go ahead.
Terry has a question.
Don't leave yet. Terry has a question.
Does she want to type it? Or she speak it?
Mike, if you want. Not hearing anything yet. Where's Terry? Are you taking the mic?
She might be typing it.
Oh, maybe.
Maybe.
We'll find out in a minute.
Shalom. So I can hear myself.
Soteria. And Lorraine. I think Terry's coming back with a question here. Oh, on the cover of the, oh boy. Yes. Hold on. I have that book across the table from me somewhere. Yep. On the cover, the front cover or the back cover? Probably the front cover, I'm guessing, right? Yeah, front cover, yeah. There's a very strange picture. Yes. Yeah, there's a sun with a smile and a moon and a bunch of stars and yeah, kind of a funny picture. Generally speaking, the sun represents the groom and the moon represents the bride, respective to the tree of life and all of that stuff. Joseph's dream. I don't know. It's just a fun cover. Who knows? They probably. I'm not even sure why. Why the faces? I don't know. I have no idea. It's really not that pertinent to the text, other than in terms of the partsufim. In terms of personae, you have a bride and a groom. But I don't think that's. I don't know. I couldn't tell you. I've read the book a few times through, so it's just a cute picture. I don't know. Maybe it gets people to open the book up. Sometimes publishers, I had some good books once that I found were classified by the publisher under occult. Like, you got to be kidding me, It's like publishers do things, publishers insist on things. This is a Jewish Lights publishing, so I don't know. It's just an odd, funny picture. I've seen pictures of the sun like that with a smiley face in stores or something. But no, all I can think of is the personification of the sun and the moon being the groom and the bride, which is really what it's all about. So that's the only thing I can think of. I'm assuming the land below might be Israel. I don't know. It's hard to say. Lots of stars in the sky. Looks like it's cut from a larger picture. It seems like up in the top left corner, there's something else that you can only see part of. So hard to say. The sun is bright. The moon's reflecting. Yeah, you see the little tiny, they almost look like hairs, little tiny lines coming off the backside of the crescent of the moon. That's the idea of reflecting. The moon only reflects part of the light of the sun. It's the, yeah. So that's an idea there, So I have to look at it some more. I've never even really bothered with that picture. It's funny you mentioned it. I just kind of just glanced at it, so. Alrighty then. I think we'll say shalom. Have a nice rest of the week. Take the Shabbat blessings with you. Have a great week. Check the group. Post some stuff. Ask questions. Make comments. Love you all. That's all I got. That's all the cat has. That's all the 2 dogs have. All Sheva has. Lila Toe. All right. Good night, y'all. Keep inviting people to the group, and we'll see you soon. We'll talk to you soon.